G'day. Hi, this is Alt-Shift-X. Today we are talking about House of the Dragon Season 3, Episode 2. The episode is called Queen's Landing, because in this episode, Rhaenyra takes the throne. Rhaenyra won the Game of Thrones. She's the queen. She's in charge. She did the thing. So it's over now, right? The show's over. She won. It's done. Everything's gonna be good times from here on, right? Unfortunately not. This is just the beginning. She won, and it feels like it's not worth it. She lost her son Jace. She lost her son Luke. Thousands have been burned. And I think the theme of this episode today is victory, but at what cost? Was it even worth it? And how do we put the pieces back together now? Rhaenyra also kills Otto just as Alicent walks in. So what the hell is the relationship between Rhaenyra and Alicent now? Aemond Targaryen took Harrenhal and killed Simon Strong, the most beloved, innocent enjoyer of goose in Westeros, is dead. Rhaena tried to hide in the Vale, but Lady Jane Arryn was not too welcoming. There's a lot going on. Aegon and Larys met some pirates. Redonkulous. We'll discuss it all. So welcome to the live stream. We're going to talk about what happened, what does it mean, how is the show different to the books. This stream will have no spoilers for future episodes of Hot D, except in the spoiler zone at the end of the live stream. You will be warned. We are live streaming after every episode of House of the Dragon airs at about 10:15 p.m. Eastern Time Sundays. You can also listen to Dragon Time with my evil half-brother Alt-Shift-X and Glidus. Alt-Shift-X and Glidus get quite opinionated and sometimes slightly silly in Dragon Time. The Dragon Time episode about House of the Dragon Season 3 Episode 2 is 5 hours long, and it's out now on Nebula. So if you want even more dragon talk, go sign up to Nebula. It helps support this channel. There's also a recent chat with Glidus and Swift about the future of this season. That's a spoilery chat that you can see on Nebula. It's linked in the video description. If you sign up with my link, you get 50% off an annual subscription. And I appreciate it. Thank you. So this season, we are not making weekly explained videos as we did in prior seasons, but we are covering the upcoming Game of Thrones play in July in Stratford-upon-Avon. The play is about the Harrenhal tourney and Robert's Rebellion and the events that lead up to Game of Thrones. It involves people like Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark and Howland Reed and Ashara Dane, so I'm very excited to cover that play in July. But today we are talking about Queen's Landing. I want to hear what you thought of the episode, and we're going to talk all about it. So, last episode, we saw the battle in the Gullet, when Shariko and her Triarchy navy attacked the Velaryon forces and killed Rhaenyra's son and heir, Jace. And it was a fun and exciting and spectacular battle. It was fun to watch, but the aftermath is no fun at all. We see these mournful scenes of men being burned and the dead floating in the ocean and the dragons flying overhead. And it's some of the same spectacular imagery, but this time it's heartrending and sad. The score by Ramin Djawadi does a lot of work here. But it's terribly mournful after the death of Jace, and we see Baela's miserable face as she's bringing her betrothed, the man who she was going to marry, Jace, is dead. So Baela says, "It is won." And we just see the terrible cost of everything that's happened. One detail that I find curious is that the Dragon Keepers are here. The Dragon Keepers are these blokes in grey robes, with bald heads, and the Dragon Keepers are the people who wrangle the dragons and train people how to use dragons. And in Season 2, the Dragon Keepers got angry at Rhaenyra because the Dragon Keepers objected to giving dragons to Ulf and Hugh and Adam, all of these random bastards who aren't true Targaryen dragon lords. So I'm curious what the relationship is with the Dragon Keepers now, because the last couple of episodes have shown that we really need the Dragon Keepers, because Rhaena couldn't control her dragon Sheepstealer. Maybe if we had the Dragon Keepers giving lessons and helping train the dragons, then we would, like, address that problem. So, I don't know. I'm curious what's going on with the Dragon Keepers. But that's just a small detail. The point is that the Team Black won the war, but at terrible cost. As Corlys said, if this is victory, I hope I never see another. And let's not forget that Jace was going to be king. Like, Jace was Rhaenyra's heir. And Jace seemed like a pretty decent kid. Jace really cared about trying to do the right thing and, you know, trying to learn Valyrian correctly and to be a good ruler. So it seems like a terrible loss that he's died, and Jace will never be king, and Baelor will never be queen of Westeros. This also fits a pattern from what we saw in A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms this year. Spoilers for A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms Season 1, but in that season, Baelor Targaryen dies. Baelor was also a dark-haired Targaryen, and he also seemed like he would make a great king, but he tragically died in A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. I think that Jon Snow also fits this pattern. Jon Snow is dark-haired. Jon Snow is secretly a Targaryen. I think that Jon Snow would make a good king, but in the books and the show, he tragically dies. So I don't know what it is, but George Martin keeps killing off his dark-haired Targaryens. So Rhaenyra faces the death of her son, and there's this really intense performance by Emma Darcy showing her shock and grief and anger and denial and rage, and she goes through so many different emotions. And I think what makes it so heartbreaking is that she talks to Jace's corpse as though he's a little boy who has misbehaved. She keeps saying, what have you done? As though he's, like, run off and done something naughty. So, like, you know, this is, of course, a huge political loss, because Rhaenyra has lost one of her dragon riders, she's lost a prince, she's lost an heir, but in this moment, it's about a parent having lost her son. So it's an amazing performance by Emma Darcy, I think. And so she gets interrupted by Laurent Marbrand. So Laurent Marbrand is the Queensguard knight who helped Jace to lock Rhaenyra in her room last episode. So if it wasn't for Laurent, Jace might still be alive. I mean, Rhaenyra might be the one who died if Rhaenyra went to war to the gullet like she wanted. But Laurent disobeyed his queen, Rhaenyra, and obeyed Prince Jace instead. And so Laurent feels responsible for all of this. And so Laurent kind of interrupts Rhaenyra's grieving and says, you have to kill me now, my queen. You got to kill me to restore my honor. And Rhaenyra just says, now is not the time. Stop interrupting, Laurent. This isn't about you. She's busy grieving. And then later, Rhaenyra says, when Laurent isn't even in the room, Rhaenyra says as she's leaving, oh, yeah, Laurent can die. Laurent can choose how he gets to die. And so it just seems like a sad, stupid tragedy that Laurent was kind of trying to do the right thing. Like, Laurent was given an impossible choice because Jace said, your life for hers. Like, Jace ordered Laurent to lock Rhaenyra up, fully knowing that Laurent would probably be executed for it. Like, Laurent was stuck between a rock and a hard place. He had to disobey Prince Jace or disobey Queen Rhaenyra. He probably should have obeyed Rhaenyra. But he was in an impossible position, and it's similar to the impossible position that Sir Eric Cargill was in, and Sir Aric Cargill was in, and what Sir Criston was in, and Sir Rickard Thorne this episode. Alicent's sworn protector Rickard Thorne is put in this impossible position where Alicent is plotting against Team Green. Alicent is betraying her own side and betraying her own family, and Rickard is like, well, shit. Do I obey Queen Alicent in her treason, or do I betray Alicent to try and help Team Green and Aegon and Aemond? And ultimately, Rickard chooses to disobey Queen Alicent. And that's not a coincidence. Like, these knights are choosing to disobey their queen to side with the men instead. And that's what this episode is also about. What this whole show is about how many of these men are choosing to disobey and disregard the woman's leadership and to go along with the men instead. Like, even Alicent does manage to convince the Goldcloaks to help Rhaenyra instead of fighting to defend King's Landing from Team Black. But ultimately, part of the reason, or most of the reason, why the Gold Cloaks and Luther Largent, why they side with Daemon and Rhaenyra is because of their relationship with Daemon. Daemon was the one who used to be the commander of the Gold Cloaks. Daemon used to host fun orgies for the Gold Cloaks in season 1. And that boys club bromance is part of why the Gold Cloaks side with him in the end. So what this show has always been about is Rhaenyra and Alicent trying to find ways to wield power in this patriarchal world. And so that's why Rhaenyra wields a sword this episode. Rhaenyra wears armor and a sword, and she tries to assert herself in like a masculine way this episode because she's thinking that only when she behaves like a man and has the imagery of a male will she be taken seriously. But she also has the impediment that she doesn't know how to wield a sword. She was never trained to use a sword, as she said last season. So it's grappling with gender, and it's grappling with the terrible cost of this war. So we see the dragons cleaning up the gullet and burning the remaining pirates at the gullet. And we see that Ulf's dragon Silverwing and Hugh's dragon Vermithor appear at the gullet. In the books, Hugh and Ulf and Nettles on Sheepstealer, they were all at the gullet in the first place. There's like 5 dragons at the gullet in the books, but in the show they chose to focus it more on Rhaena, Jason, Baylor. So Rhaenyra is shocked by the death of Jace. And I wonder what would have happened if Rhaenyra went instead, like she wanted. I mean, Rhaenyra's dragon Syrax is bigger and stronger and more experienced. I wonder if that whole strategy that the Triarchy used to kill Vermax with like weighing Vermax down with the grapnel and the anchor thing, I wonder if that might not have worked on Syrax, because Syrax is bigger and stronger. The books talk about how the older dragons have, like, bigger, tougher scales, and so you can't punch through the scales of a larger dragon. So that whole strategy to kill Vermax might not have worked on Syrax. But on the other hand, yeah, Rhaenyra might have been killed if she went to the gullet. So I think Rhaenyra is tortured by that as well. Because in a way, Jace was stupid and got himself killed, but in a way, Jace saved Rhaenyra as well, potentially. So then, after this heartrending performance of grief and anger, like, Rhaenyra is blaming all the other people at Dragonstone for disobeying her, because it wasn't just Laurent Marbrand and Jace. Like, many of the other people on Dragonstone heard Rhaenyra yelling, "Let me out," and they didn't do it. In a way, they all betrayed her, and so Rhaenyra says that later, and she disregards Bartimaeus Celtigar, and she disregards Maester Gerardus when she just storms out, and she just does her own thing on her dragon with Daemon. Which is fine, but like, one of the other questions this episode is, who are Rhaenyra's allies now? Like, Mysaria is saying, you can trust me, Rhaenyra. But, like, can Rhaenyra trust Mysaria? Like, Mysaria is an extremely shifty spy master who has switched sides and worked with the Greens multiple times. And Rhaenyra has Daemon, but, like, until Daemon's recent ayahuasca retreat, Daemon was pretty set on, like, stealing the throne from Rhaenyra. Like, Daemon was having dreams of cutting off Rhaenyra's head not that long ago. And yeah, like, Rhaenyra certainly can't trust her council on Dragonstone. So, like, Rhaenyra now has a very different set of problems. Like, before, Rhaenyra was worried about, Vhagar coming and burning her and the Green's armies destroying her. But now Rhaenyra has a different problem, which is, how does she rule King's Landing? To be a successful ruling queen, she's going to need allies. She's going to need advisors. She's going to have, like, networks and power brokers and stakeholders. And, like, does she know how to do that? She doesn't seem very confident when she's, like, holding court in the throne room and she's trying to, like, do political theater. She's not very confident with that. She's never been confident with that. So I think how she's going to handle being queen is a really interesting question. So Rhaena Targaryen has really put her foot in it lately. So Rhaena Targaryen is one of the daughters of Daemon Targaryen and Lena Velaryon. She's the younger sister of Baelor. In the books, Baelor and Rhaena are twins. I'm not sure if they are twins in the show as well. Maybe they're just sisters. I'm not sure. But Rhaena always felt left out because felt ignored by Daemon because Rhaena didn't have a dragon. Daemon has the dragon Caraxes, Laena had the dragon Vhagar, Baela has the dragon Moondancer, Rhaena didn't have shit. In the books, there's a little bit about Rhaena has these eggs, and one of Rhaena's eggs does hatch, but then the hatchling, it dies, or does it like bite her, then someone has to kill her? I think her hatchling dies, or it comes out like misformed or misshapen. So Rhaena really feels left out by that whole situation, and so in the books, Rhaena claimed the dragon Sheepstealer. And this is a big change from the books. In the books, it's a completely different character called Nettles who claims Sheepstealer. But yeah, so Rhaena claimed Sheepstealer, and she's like, finally, I have a dragon. Finally, I'll be taken seriously. I suppose Rhaena mirrors Alicent and Rhaenyra in the sense that Rhaena is another woman who's trying to be taken seriously and trying to get the respect of the men and the patriarchal world around her by getting power. And yeah, like Alicent and Rhaenyra, it's not easy, and it doesn't turn out so good. Because after Rhaena got Sheepstealer, flew her to the gullet last episode, Sheepstealer attacked her own men. Sheepstealer almost killed Rhaena's sister Baela, and so Rhaena's like, shit, this did not work out how I planned. Getting a fire-breathing lizard has in fact not solved all of my problems. Getting a fire-breathing lizard is not making my daddy love me. In fact, it might be creating more issues for my family. So Rhaena, instead of flying back to Dragonstone and saying, hey, sorry about the dragon situation, Rhaena has instead gone back to the Vale, which is the region ruled by Lady Jane Arryn. Shall we look at the map? So Jane Arryn rules the Vale. So remember, like, Lysa Arryn and little Sweet Robin, they rule the Vale in Game of Thrones. Currently, Jane Arryn rules the Vale. And so that's where Rhaena was in season 2, and it's where she's returned. And so Rhaena comes to Jane Arryn and says, hey, can I like hide in the Eyrie with you? Because I suppose Rhaena is terrified that Rhaenyra and Team Black will blame Rhaena for the death of Jace. Or will blame her for, burning thousands of their men or hundreds of their men on the gullet. Which, I think is cowardly. Like, I think if Rhaena went to Rhaenyra and just told the truth and just said, like, hey, I was trying to help, my dragon disobeyed me, sorry about that, I hope we can fix this. Maybe that would have been the more honorable, responsible thing to do. But, Rhaena is young and she's afraid, and she runs back to the Vale. It seems as though she can kind of control Sheepstealer, because Sheepstealer is, like, obediently parked in the background there. So it's not clear to me how much Rhaena can control Sheepstealer, but Rhaena seems to want to come here to the Vale and talks to Jane Arryn. And Jane Arryn is like, no, like, I'm not gonna help you. Rhaena is creating more problems for Jane, because if Jane is, like, openly protecting Rhaena, that's just gonna anger Rhaenyra. And Rhaena looks really guilty for running away, and so Jane is gonna look guilty for protecting Rhaena. So Jane ultimately says, look, like, I'm not going to openly side with you because that makes me look bad, but you can keep Sheepstealer. You can go hide in the hills nearby. I can't stop you from doing that, because Jane does want protection. Jane said since season 2 that she wants a dragon to protect the Vale, because Jane is worried about Aemond and Vhagar coming and burning her. So The Vale has a history with dragons. Like, in Aegon's conquest, Vhagar came to the Eyrie and threatened the Arryns, and then they surrendered. And so Jane knows that the one thing that can take over her castle of the Eyrie is dragons. The Eyrie is really strong against people. Like, you've got to, like, climb up a mountain in order to attack their castle. But dragons can just fly up there. So Jane's like, well, the only protection from a dragon is another dragon. And so she's hopeful that Sheepstealer might offer some protection. And yeah, like, we've also got to remember that Rhaena abandoned her brothers. So, like, Rhaenyra's children, her youngest children, are Aegon and Viserys. Those are the little blonde kids that she had with Daemon. And Aegon and Viserys are Rhaena's half-brothers through their father Daemon. And Rhaenyra said, like, hey, Rhaena, I am ordering you, and I'm trusting you to protect Joffrey and Aegon and Viserys. Joffrey is still at the Vale, but Aegon and Viserys went off and sailed to Pentos. And Rhaena was meant to go with them. Rhaena is meant to be protecting Prince Aegon and Prince Viserys, but she abandoned them. Aegon and Viserys also have a whole different plotline in the books. But that's like another betrayal that Rhaenyra might be furious about. So, yeah, so the point is that Rhaena has really fucked up, and she knows it. And I think she really wants a shower. Remember how, like, Ormond was disgusted by that, like, stinky messenger last episode? Rhaena is looking like she's equally in need of a shower. They should have given Jane another little pomander, little sniffing jewel pod to get rid of the bad smell. They should have done that. So yeah, that's what's going on with Rhaena. I guess she's got to go back to the hills and continue eating sheep. It's interesting this episode that Daemon says it's impossible to claim a wild dragon, which is interesting. Like, the books certainly say that it's more difficult to claim a wild dragon. The books say that it's easier to claim a dragon that has had riders before and that is, like, used to humans and stuff. But Daemon says it's flat out impossible to claim a wild dragon. And I'm curious why he thinks that. I wonder if Daemon has tried to claim a wild dragon himself in the past and failed. And I think Daemon's the kind of guy who's like, well, if I failed to claim a wild dragon, then no one can claim a wild dragon. It must be impossible. But, you know, maybe Rhaena will succeed in taming Sheepstealer. Maybe she will achieve the impossible. But for now, she's stuck in the hills eating burnt mutton. So then we are with Daemon Targaryen with the Rivermen. So all through Season 2, Daemon was trying to gather an army of Rivermen, of Riverlords, the people in the Riverlands, to help Team Black and Rhaenyra. And he got Willem Blackwood to do all those war crimes, and then he executed Willem Blackwood, and young Oscar Tully is now the Lord Paramount of the Riverlands. This young kid, Oscar, is in charge of this region. After the death of Oscar's grandsire, Lord Grover Tully, another Muppet, because Alice Rivers assassinated Grover Tully off-screen, which is a pretty wild thing that happened, that they didn't draw much attention to it. But yeah, Alice assassinated a lord. Do you think, like, if Oscar Tully finds out that this witch assassinated his grandpa, do you think Oscar might be cross about that? I'm very curious. Oscar Tully is, I think, combining a few different characters from the books. In the books, there's a character called Benjicott Blackwood, and Benjicott Blackwood is a young lord of Raventree, and he is very mature for his age and very brave, and he fights in these battles. And Benjicott in the books, he cries when he sees all of the dead from the fish feed, but he's brave nonetheless. And he's like 11 years old in the books, I think. Which is ridiculously young. I don't know why George Martin has these ridiculously young characters fighting in battles and doing all this stuff, but that's what he does. So anyway, so in the previous episode, the Rivermen and Daemon had just defeated a Westerman Lannister army, and Lord Jason Lannister was killed by the Northmen and Roddy the Ruin's Winter Wolves. And now there's another battle that has taken place off screen called the Fish Feed. And so the Rivermen pushed the Westermen into the lake. They slaughtered thousands of Westermen. Their bodies sank into the waters and are now feeding the fishes. And so that's why they call it the Fish Feed. The Lannisters are feeding the fishes. In the books, this was the bloodiest land battle in this whole war. They killed thousands of Westermen. It basically wiped out the Lannister army, or like broke their strength. In the books, the Westermen were led by Lord Humphrey Lefford at this point, who was a guy who was so old and so wounded that he had to be carried about in a chair while he was leading the army. In the books, Daemon and Caraxes aren't at this battle, and they aren't in the previous battle either. It was just like an army versus army battle, which I think makes more sense. Like, if Daemon and his dragon were at both of these battles, why did they even need the army of Rivermen? Like, if you've got a dragon against an army, I feel like the dragon could just burn the whole army. Like, we've seen that before. That's something that kind of doesn't make sense about this whole story in both the books and the show. It's not clear what the point of an army is if you've got dragons that can burn armies. Sometimes there's like excuses, like George comes up with reasons to like make it make sense. Like in Aegon's Conquest, there's a war in the Stormlands where there's a dragon. Like I mean, like the whole story of Aegon's Conquest is just Aegon and his sisters and their dragons burning all of their enemies. But like in one battle, there's this big storm that forces the dragons to like stay down on the ground. They can't fly because of the storm in the Stormlands, and so that sort of equalizes things. But yeah, in my opinion, it doesn't always make a lot of sense. Anyway, so yeah, in the books, Daemon wasn't at this battle, and there were a bunch of other random river lords involved in these battles. People like Lord Forrest Frey and Roddy Dustin and Garibold Grey and Red Rob Rivers. Lord Biggleston. Any Lord Biggleston stands in the chat? Lord Biggleston was named after a friend of the author George Martin. Biggleston ran a comics fanzine in the 60s that George R.R. Martin wrote for. George R.R. Martin, he says that he was at the first ever San Diego Comic-Con. Like, he bought the first ticket for the first Comic-Con. And George Martin, like, as a kid, he was writing in these fan magazines in the 60s that they would, like, print themselves, and they would post comics to each other and write these superhero stories. That's where the author of Game of Thrones came up from, was the 60s comic book fandom. In 1960. What a world. Anyway, so yeah, in the books there's a lot of these like random minor characters. But in the TV show they've taken out a lot of those minor characters and they're instead putting the main characters like Daemon into the story, which I think makes sense because yeah, if you included all of the random characters that are in the books, there would be hundreds of characters in this show and most of them would be very unimportant and we would all forget their names. So they're choosing to center the story on the main characters instead. So the Rivermen are partying, celebrating their victory. Daemon seems to be actually getting along with other people for once. They sing a song about the victory called The Fish Feed. Daemon poses with the dead Jason Lannister. A good time is had by all. Now that Jason is dead, his son Lorien Lannister is now the Lord of Casterly Rock, but Lorien is very young. I think it's Lorien. So Jason's wife, Johanna Lannister, rules Casterly Rock instead. Meanwhile, Jason's twin brother, Tywin Lannister, is apparently lost at sea still. We haven't seen what happened to Tywin, and I really hope we do see Tywin again. Tywin has some cool stuff in the books to do, so I hope that we see Tywin again, but we'll have to wait and see. So they celebrate the victory, and then we see Lord Simon Strong has come along, the Lord of Drip, in all his burgundy clothes and fancy jewelry. He comes along, delivers some wine, he talks about virile young men, and he delivers some news to Daemon. And so Daemon finds out that Jace, Rhaenyra's son, is dead. And his reaction is interesting. Like he seems like genuinely upset for Rhaenyra. I don't think that Daemon ever liked Jace very much. And, you know, if anything, Jace was kind of a rival to Daemon who put Daemon further down the line of succession. You know, Jace was an obstacle to Daemon getting the throne, I think, early on. But now I feel like Daemon seems genuinely sympathetic for Rhaenyra. Daemon is more loyal to Rhaenyra now after his peyote psychotherapy clinic with Alice. And, you know, you can't help but be reminded of Season 1, Episode 3, when Daemon got some bad news on a scroll like this, and that time Daemon assaulted the messenger. He tried to beat him to death with a helmet, but this time Daemon's reaction is a bit more muted and a bit more humble, and he tells everyone to march towards King's Landing while Daemon goes ahead on his dragon. So, yeah, Daemon I think, is changed after his experiences last season. He's more humble. He's capable of having fun with other people. He's not as aggressive. Although in this episode, we do see Daemon being very rude and aggressive with Hugh and Ulf, which we'll get to. So, Jace is dead. Daemon heads towards King's Landing. I think it's interesting that Daemon says, "I've been summoned to King's Landing to claim the Iron Throne, ... for Rhaenyra." And he says it in a way that kind of sounds like, oh, is Daemon claiming the throne for himself, or is he doing this for Rhaenyra? So even after all of the shenanigans last season, I think there's still a part of Daemon that wants the throne for himself. And we see that when Rhaenyra and Daemon enter the throne room this episode. Daemon holds Rhaenyra's hand, almost like holding her back, and then Rhaenyra, like, gets her hand out of Daemon's grasp and walks on without him. And I feel like there's still a bit of tension where Daemon's not entirely okay with Rhaenyra ruling, not him. So Daemon then talks to Alice Rivers, the mysterious witch of Harrenhal. And Alice talks about how she helped Daemon get this army, and Alice says she wants a reward. Alice said she wants Harrenhal, which is the big castle. Which is interesting. Like, I'd love to know why Alice wants Harrenhal. We really don't know, like, what Alice is. The books say that Alice might be a bastard daughter of Simon Strong. Alice seems to be connected to the magic of the old gods and the weirwood trees and the green men, so she might be a green seer with the ability to see the future. Alice claims that she is a barn owl trapped in the body of a woman. It seems as though Alice might have the ability to transform into a goat. Unclear. Alice is a genuine mystery. The books don't say what Alice is either. Alice is kind of is not fully explained in the books yet. She's still a mystery. So yeah, last season, Alice was telling Daemon to, like, stop doing war crimes and to be loyal to Rhaenyra. She also apparently killed Lord Grover Tully. And now Alice is like, I want Harrenhal. Last season, Alice said that Harrenhal was built on a sacred grove of weirwood trees. Like, when Harren the Black built Harrenhal, he cut down all these sacred trees to build it. And Alice seems connected to that weirwood old god's magic. I feel like maybe Alice is like the ghost of those weirwood trees. She's the spirit of those trees that were destroyed, and she's tied to Harrenhal. I don't think Alice can, like, leave far from Harrenhal. I think she's tied to this place. She uses the word home in this episode, and I feel like Harrenhal is, like, inextricably Alice's home. That's the vibe that I get. There's also the Isle of Faces on the God's Eye Lake, which is a place that's sacred to the old gods, and it's got all these weirwood trees, and that's where the green men are in the books, and so that's a very sacred, powerful place. So, you know, maybe Alice just wants more control and more autonomy over her home. Maybe she wants just some freedom and some peace and to be able to make her home a little sanctuary. Maybe she wants all the antlered green men satyrs to be able to just hang out and chill and not be bothered. Maybe that's what she wants. But maybe she has bigger ambitions. Maybe she wants power. She says about, like Daemon says, no, you can't have Harrenhal, we'll give you a different reward. And Alice says, you offer me rubies, but that will not satisfy my hunger. And there's something kind of dark and terrifying about her line, about her hunger. Because the old gods, like, they are, like, nature gods. They are, like, you know, nature tends to be associated with, like, peace and beauty and unity and good times. But in the books, there is something very, like, scary and dark about the old gods as well. Check out this artwork by Chase Stone. There's something, like, alien and creepy and terrifying about the weirwoods. George R. R. Martin has written a bunch of sci-fi stories about, like, alien hive minds that consume human souls. And that is, like, very similar to what the weirwood trees are in A Song of Ice and Fire. And, you know, like, Bloodraven and Bran in the main Game of Thrones series, like, it really seems like, you know, Bloodraven is, like, the tree wizard guy who teaches magic to Bran, and Bloodraven seems sinister, or the Children of the Forest seem sinister. They're, like, manipulating Bran, exploiting his power. They possibly feed Bran's friend Jojen to Bran. They make him eat his friend, possibly, is a theory. So I see that, like, evil, that, like, tradition of human sacrifice, that, like, the spirit of this planet eating human souls. And, like, I see that in Alice when she says that, you know, this does not satisfy my hunger. So I feel like, we've seen like the fun side of Alice. We've seen the whimsical barn owl side of Alice. But I think that there's also a dark side to Alice. The dark side that murders Lord Grover Tully. And so I'm curious to like see that side come out, especially now that Alice is meeting Aemond. How will Alice get along with Aemond is a very fun question, and I'm excited to see where that goes. And also she's got a great purple dress. I don't know why purple is like the house colors of House Strong, but it looks great. There's some incredible outfits this episode. I mean, Rhaenyra, my god. We should remember with Harrenhal as well. Last season, Jace went to the Freys at the Twins, and Jace promised that the Freys could have Harrenhal. So Daemon can't give Harrenhal to Alice even if he wanted to, because it's already promised to the Freys. I mean, Daemon kind of laughs at Alice and belittles her when she asks for Harrenhal. He's like, no, like, we're not going to give... Like, Harrenhal is the biggest castle in Westeros. And Daemon's like, no, we're not going to give the biggest castle in Westeros to some random witch, bastard, goat lady who wants it. Like, as politicians, they need to use castles to build alliances, not, like, give them to random people who may or may not be owls. Like, that's just not good policy. That's not good politics. You don't give castles to owls. And, like, Alice seems, like, surprised by that. Like, it's interesting to me that Alice seems naive when she asks for Harrenhal. Like, what did Alice expect? Did Alice really think that Prince Daemon was going to give her Harrenhal? But, like, maybe she is naive, because maybe she is an owl. Like, maybe she is a tree ghost. She doesn't understand politics. It's very, very interesting character. Very fun. Alice also says that Daemon's coming is an omen of the end of many things, which is curious. Like what is he an omen of? Is it the end of the war, the end of the dragons, the end of the Targaryens, the end of magic in this world, the end of House Strong? There's a lot of things that it could be. And I feel like this connects to what Helena says this episode. She's looking at a caterpillar, and Helena says that, oh, this is strange. This isn't the season. It's the wrong season for this caterpillar to happen. And so I think there's a sense of, like, the changing of the tides here. There's a sense in the books that, like, the tides of magic, they sort of come and go. Like, sometimes there are times when magic is strong in this world, and sometimes there are times when magic wanes. And it seems as though, like, when more dragons are around, then magic is stronger. And there's also the question of, like, when the White Walkers come and when the White Walkers don't go. It's all very mysterious. So, let's go back to the Gullet, where Alan is looking for Corlys. So Lord Corlys Velaryon is one of the richest, most powerful lords in the realm, and he is the father of Alan and Adam, who are his bastard sons. And Corlys ignored Alan and Adam throughout their childhood. He didn't help them out very much. He didn't acknowledge them as his sons, and Alan is really pissed off about that. But Corlys is now finally starting to acknowledge Alan and Adam, and Alan is finally admitting that, like, yeah, he does want Corlys in his life. He yelled, "Father!" last episode when Corlys fell overboard. And so Alan is now desperately seeking his father. It would be so cruel and sad if Corlys did die last episode, like in the first moment that Alan and Corlys start actually loving each other and behaving like a father and son. Imagine if Corlys did die then. But no, Corlys has survived somehow. I don't know how Corlys survived, because he was wearing that heavy armor. And, you know, Shariko was saying, if you fall overboard in armor, you're going to die. But Corlys survives, and so I hope that Tyland will survive as well. And so Alan is searching around all of these corpses on the beach. I feel like Alan also needs one of those little scent things that Ormond had, one of those little pomanders, little lavender oil thing, because you do not want to be smelling all those corpses, my goodness. But Alan talks to Baela, who is Corlys's granddaughter. And Baela says, well, look, Corlys has almost died before, and he keeps surviving. Like, remember in season 1, Corlys fell overboard and had his neck slit, and Corlys still somehow survived. Corlys is tough. So Baela says, yeah, Corlys is going to come back. And they talk about how Baylor knew Corlys growing up, but Alan didn't. And Baylor says that, the reason why Corlys didn't acknowledge Alan and Adam is because Corlys loved his wife, Rhaenys. And it would upset Rhaenys for Corlys to be hanging out with his bastard sons from his infidelity. Corlys cheated on Rhaenys to have Adam and Alan, at least in the books. The timeline's a little unclear in the show because Alan and Adam are older in the show. But yeah, it's a very difficult thing for Alan to hear. He's having a tough time with his feelings, is Alan. And they talk about how they have lost too much. Like, Baylor's mother, Laena, died in season 1. Her uncle, Laenor, disappeared and is believed to be dead. Luke died, and he was meant to be the heir to Driftmark and was to be the husband of Rhaena. And now Rhaena has run off to the Vale. It's kind of funny that no one seems to have noticed that Rhaena has disappeared. Like, I mean, they probably should think of Rhaena, right? Because Rhaenyra this episode, she says that, we saw someone riding Sheepstealer at the Gullet. Who could that possibly be riding Sheepstealer? And Daemon's like, how did the Greens get another dragon? How could that happen? But like, Rhaena is like the only other Targaryen who could be riding a dragon, right? Like, everyone else is accounted for. Like, just by logical deduction, they should be thinking, is it possible that Rhaena was on that dragon? I guess it's confusing because, the dragon attacked the Velaryons. They think it's an enemy dragon. But still, it's kind of nuts that no one is like, we haven't heard from Rhaena in a while. Is Rhaena okay? But I guess that's the point, isn't it? The point is that no one thinks about Rhaena. Rhaena feels ignored and forgotten. And the fact that no one is talking about her right now is just more proof that she tragically is ignored. It's so sad. Corlys's family has had a pretty rough 20 years. Rhaenys died recently as well last season, and now the Triarchy have burned High Tide. So High Tide was Corlys's pride and joy. High Tide was this new castle that he built with his wealth, and he made that wealth by sailing all over the world. We saw all those treasures that he had in High Tide in season 1. And now Shariko and the Triarchy have burned High Tide. In the books, the Triarchy brutally attack Driftmark. The Triarchy slaughter like thousands of civilians in Driftmark. They destroy a whole town called Spicetown, and it never recovers. So this is like a very serious blow to House Velaryon. House Velaryon never like fully recovers from how it suffers in this war. And that's part of why House Velaryon is not mentioned in Game of Thrones. Like, at this time, House Velaryon is maybe the second or third most powerful house in the realm. But in Game of Thrones, they're not so important. There are Velaryon characters in the books. Like Aurane Waters is this bastard Velaryon who Cersei gives a fleet because she has a crush on him. And then he runs off and becomes a pirate king. And it's hilarious. So, shout out to my Aurane Waters fans. But yeah, they're never quite powerful again in the way that they are now. So Corlys looks at his burning castle and he stands with like what's left of his family, and we just get this sense that House Velaryon has grown small. There's been so much loss. There's been so much destruction, and Corlys feels personally responsible for much of this. Like Rhaenys said in season 1 that, hey, like Corlys, your ambitions, your desire to get a Velaryon on the throne is the reason why we keep dying. The reason why we've been sucked into this war is because, Baelor and Rhaena were betrothed to Jace and Luke, and, Corlys, got his son Laenor married to Rhaenyra. Like, Corlys's ambitions tied his family to Rhaenyra's family, dragged them into this war. And so it's his hubris that has brought him down, like Ozymandias. And it's sort of bitter and ironic and fucked up that it's only now that Corlys has lost everything. Like, all of his other family members have died just about. It's only now that he goes to Alan and he's like, oh, hey, Alan, you can have my name. You can be a Velaryon. Everyone else has died, so yeah, I'll finally acknowledge you. Like, it's kind of messed up. that's what's happened. But I guess they say that, you know, you only appreciate it once it's gone. You only start appreciating what you have once you've experienced loss. And also, like, in the books, they talk about how now that Rhaenys is dead, Corlys feels more able to acknowledge Alan and Adam. Like, previously, Corlys was afraid of Rhaenys being angry, and that's why he didn't acknowledge Alan and Adam. And now that she's dead, he feels more free to do so. But in the TV show, it's kind of the opposite. In the TV show, Rhaenys told Corlys, like, hey, I don't think you should mistreat Alan and Adam. I think you should acknowledge Alan and Adam. Like, Rhaenys is like, I know that you cheated, but there's no point punishing Alan and Adam for it. So in the show, it's a bit different. In the show, Corlys is honoring Rhaenys by acknowledging Alan and Adam. Which is a much nicer twist on it, I think. In the books, there's a whole thing about Alan and Adam's mother, who's called Merilda, and she's like a successful trader and sailor in her own right, and she's nicknamed Mouse, and that's a whole thing, but it seems as though they're not including Adam and Alan's mother in the show. And you know, she's kind of important because she might be a Targaryen bastard. She might be a dragon seed, because that would explain how Adam can ride a dragon. Because Adam can't have gotten dragon blood from Corlys, because Corlys doesn't have dragon blood. He's not a Targaryen. It's only by marrying Rhaenys that his kids, Laena and Laenor, were able to ride dragons. So there's a whole mystery still of, like, where did Adam get his dragon blood? How does that work? Do you even need dragon blood? A lot of questions. So Corlys says that Alan can have his name Velaryon. So what this probably means is that Corlys will legitimize Alan, make him a Velaryon. In the books, it's only a king or a queen that can legitimize a bastard. So, like, normally bastards, they don't get their father's name. They just get called, like, Snow or Waters or Rivers, depending on where they were born. That's if they're acknowledged. And if they're legitimized by a king or queen, then they do get their father's name, and they can inherit their father's land. So if Corlys has Alan and Adam legitimized, Adam would be the heir to Driftmark, because Adam is the elder brother, at least in the books. So potentially Adam and Alan could be the heirs to Driftmark, the future lords of House Velaryon. Previously, Corlys offered Baelor to become the heir to Driftmark, but Baelor said, nah, I am not salt and sea, I am fire and blood, I am Targaryen. Which is a little bit ominous, because her mother Laena said the same thing, and she ended up being killed by her dragon in Dragonfire. So I think it sort of sets up a dark end for Baelor, potentially, but we'll see where it goes. So I guess Corlys is assuming that, like Corlys will ask Rhaenyra to legitimize Alan and Adam. Or maybe Corlys thinks that as Hand of the Queen, he has the authority to, like, legitimize Alan on Rhaenyra's behalf. The rules are a little bit fuzzy with this stuff, but it looks like Corlys is finally acknowledging his bastards. So then we're off with Aegon and Larys on the boys' trip of a nightmare. Nightmare boys' trip. Nightmare blunt rotation. Can you imagine being stuck in a cage surrounded by quawking ravens for hours? That'd drive you mad. Sitting next to Larys, sitting next to Aegon, drive you nuts. And Aegon is having a tantrum because in the last episode, Larys kind of maybe betrayed Aegon because they're trying to escape Westeros. They're trying to go and hide in Braavos and to wait out the war. But last episode, they got captured by some Stauntons who were on Team Black. And they captured Aegon and Larys. And Larys said, oh, this is King Aegon, by the way. Like, you've just captured the king. Congratulations. And Aegon's like, you betrayed me. You revealed my identity. But Larys is saying, well, no, I saved you because they would have killed us if they didn't know who we were. But I think it sort of raises this question of, like, does Larys really care about Aegon, or is Larys just going to sell Aegon out at the first opportunity? Because Larys last season, he did seem to have some genuine sympathy for Aegon. Because Larys was talking about how Aegon is now physically disabled by his injuries and his burns, and how Aegon will need to use his mind now, as Larys does. And it seems like there was some sincere emotion there. But also, like, Laris is like a slippery motherfucker who only cares about himself and is sadistic and is willing to betray anyone. So it's an interesting question of like, what is this relationship? Does Laris really care about Aegon at all? And what does Aegon want? I think those are the relevant questions here. So they're captured by the Stauntons, but then they look out and they see that the Triarchy pirates have attacked the Stauntons, which is very odd. It's surprising. But Laris figures out that, oh yeah, like the Greens invited the Triarchy to attack, and so now there's pirates running around the Crown lands. And this is something that was foreshadowed in Season 2. So like in Season 2, Aemond said, let's get the Triarchy to attack Team Black. And then Tyland and Alicent and Kristen said, that's a terrible idea. The Triarchy are untrustworthy, dangerous pirates. We should not invite these dangerous pirates into our lands. And it turns out they were right, because the Triarchy are now running amok. I mean, I suppose, they are attacking Stauntons, so I guess the Triarchy are kind of helping Team Green here. But will they continue to be helpful, or will the Triarchy be a problem in the future? Will they just become raiders? Who knows? So war is creating all of these complex, messy problems that might make trouble for a long time. So Aegon and Laris manage to awkwardly kill a Staunton man and escape. I think sort of the awkwardness and the messiness of this violence it's an interesting contrast to like the way Daemon fights this episode. Because in this episode, we see Daemon like effortlessly slaughter dozens of Greens in the Red Keep, and we see Aemond effortlessly slaughter a bunch of people in Harrenhal. But now here, like Aegon and Laris are not as physically capable, and so they really struggle to kill this one guy by like bopping him on the head with a raven cage, and then like shivving him with an arrow. And it's a much more awkward, ugly kind of violence. And so Laris says, let's go to Duskendale and take a boat to Braavos where we can hide. And Aegon says, nope, we're going to Rook's Rest. So Rook's Rest is where Aegon was burned. Rook's Rest is the castle where his dragon Sunfire was wounded. And Aegon says we're going to go there. And Aegon says we're going to go there so that we can meet up with Kristen's men who are garrisoning the castle. Although we also know last season that Rhaenyra sent some of her own men, the Mutons, to go and retake Rook's Rest. So in the show, we don't know who actually holds Rook's Rest right now. It might be Team Black, it might be Team Green. So yeah, Aegon doesn't really fully explain why he wants to go to Rook's Rest, but you might be able to guess. And we will talk about it in the spoiler zone at the end of this live stream. Here's the map, by the way. So we don't know where Aegon and Laris are currently, but they're headed towards Rook's Rest over here on the coast. And so Dragonstone is where Rhaenyra and Daemon are based. Driftmark is where the Velaryons are, where they rule, and it was just ravaged by the Triarchy. Sharp Point was ravaged by Aemond last season. Duskendale was taken by the Greens and Kristen. And King's Landing, of course, is where the throne is, and that's where Rhaenyra just took over. And up here is Harrenhal, which is the big ruined castle that Aemond just took. And here's the Isle of Faces, which is the mysterious magical island with the weirwood trees. River Run is up here, Riverlands, etc., etc. That was Geography Corner. So, let's go back to Dragonstone with Ulf and Hugh. So Ulf and Hugh are the new dragon riders on Team Black, and they are common bastards, Targaryen bastards with dragon blood, but they are of lower social standing, and Daemon really wants to make that clear. I think it's really fun how Ulf is just sort of having a squiz at his surroundings. He seems unused to being in like a fancy environment with fancy things. And when he sees Prince Daemon Targaryen, he goes in for a hug, which I think is so funny. He goes in for a hug, and then he sees Daemon's face, and he sees that Daemon is not in a hugging mood, and then Ulf goes, ugh. Look at Ulf's face fall. Isn't that hilarious? I love it. Because that's what Ulf did with Jace last season. When Ulf saw Jace, like, he kind of sussed out that, like, okay, like, this prince thinks he's all high and mighty. Ulf tries to diffuse the social tension by being like, hey, buddy, let's, hey, finger guns, yeah, let's hang. And it doesn't work with Damon, because Damon's just all aggression. And he's really rude to Ulf and Hugh. He tries to put them in their place. He tries to demean Ulf and Hugh. Damon tries to make it very, very clear that they may be dragon riders, but they are beneath him, and they must be subservient to him. And I think part of the reason why Damon does this is that Damon feels threatened by Ulf and Hugh, because Ulf and Hugh are a threat to the feudal hierarchy. Ulf and Hugh are commoners, they're bastards, but they have two of the biggest dragons in the world. Bigger dragons than Caraxes. Nothing will make a man insecure like another man having a bigger dragon, you know? So Damon's unhappy about that, and he's trying to establish that he's in charge. Because, like, as Ulf was saying last episode, Ulf was saying, hey, I have a giant dragon, I should be a lord. I should be in charge of everything. I should have it all because I have a dragon. And Damon's saying, no, you don't have shit because you are subservient to Queen Rhaenyra. You are not highborn. You are not a dragon lord. You're just a sot and a smith. And so I think that, like, the way they're trying to navigate that, like, social hierarchy is really important here. But, you know, Damon is also chastising Ulf and Hugh for not staying near Harrenhal, because previously Rhaenyra ordered Ulf and Hugh to stay near Harrenhal and to wait for Aemon to come so that Ulf and Hugh and Adam could kill Vhagar. Because at this point, Vhagar is like the best asset that Team Green has. Vhagar is the most powerful dragon in the world, and it's really only like Vermithor and Silverwing and Caraxes and Sheepstealer and Seasmoke, those like big dragons together that have a chance of killing Vhagar. And, you know, if Hugh and Ulf and Adam stayed near Harrenhal, maybe they could have killed Vhagar. Maybe they could have ended the war. I reckon if you kill Aemond and Vhagar, the war's pretty much over. But they fled because they were scared of a goat and they were confused about the instructions. So Daemon does have like some good reason to be angry. But this is also like, this is what Daemon does in general, is that he often lashes out at people. Daemon often like lashes out at like innocent people when things go wrong. It's like how when Daemon got all mad at Mysaria and got all mad at Eric Cargill last episode, he was like blaming them for stuff of which they were innocent. This is like classic Daemon behavior. So I guess despite all of the drugs and therapy at Harrenhal last season, Daemon is still ultimately a bit of a prick. But yeah, I mean, Daemon is also trying to, you know, he's worried about the same thing Jace was worried about. Like last season, Jace said, hey, if we give dragons to random common bastards, then Targaryens are not special anymore. Like, if we're to be royalty, if we're to be kings and queens, if people are to obey us, they have to think that we're special, that we are closer to gods than men. But if any random blonde bastard can get on a dragon, then why are the Targaryens special? Why should anyone follow the Targaryens? So it's that question of like political appearances again. And Jace goes so far as to suggest that, well, maybe you don't need to be a Targaryen at all to ride a dragon last season. So it's so who gets the power? Who's allowed to wield power is an important question here. So Daemon speaks with Mysaria. Remember that Mysaria in season 1 was Daemon's lover and a sex worker, and then Daemon said that he would marry Mysaria and would have a child with Mysaria, and then they broke up, and then Mysaria became a spy master, and she worked with Otto and the Greens. And then Larys burned Mysaria's house down, and then Mysaria was imprisoned by Daemon, and Daemon forced Mysaria to help him find blood and cheese to kill Jaehaerys, and it's just been one disaster after another for Mysaria. But then she saved Rhaenyra from Eric Cargill, and then she pashed Rhaenyra, and now she's a trusted counselor on Dragonstone. So, you know, Mysaria's had a goddamn roller coaster over the last 2 seasons. And Daemon's like, what, who are you? Like, what are you up to? Daemon says, like, are you trying to get revenge on me for being mean to you? And Mysaria says, it's not about you. Which is funny. I mean, it's similar to the lesson that Alice was teaching Daemon last season. Because, like, Daemon, you know, he wants to be the king, and he wants to have all the power, and he thinks he's the coolest guy ever, and, like, his arc in season 2 was about being told that, well, no, your destiny is to help Rhaenyra. You're not the center of the universe. And again, Mysaria is kind of saying a similar thing here. But there's also this funny tension where, Daemon and Mysaria have both been intimate with Rhaenyra. I suppose Daemon doesn't know that Mysaria has kissed Rhaenyra, but it's sort of like a love triangle that's forming here. While also being a political rivalry where Mysaria is telling Rhaenyra to trust her and not trust Daemon. So it's this very sort of complicated, tense triangle that's happening here. In the books, it's different. In the books, Daemon continues having sex with Mysaria, and Rhaenyra is cool with it. That's what happens in the books, but it seems like something different is going on here. I think that Daemon and Mysaria, they both want to help Rhaenyra, but I think that they have different motivations ultimately. Like Mysaria wants to help the common people. In season 1, Mysaria told Otto, hey, you've got to close the child fighting pits. Why do we have child fighting pits? Why is that a thing that we do? Children should not be thrown into battle against each other like Pokemon. That's not what we should be doing with children. Let's stop that. And Otto said, yeah, I'll look into that. I'll look into the child fighting pits. And then we got no follow-up. It's like an email to your boss. No follow-up. And so Mysaria is hoping that Queen Rhaenyra will do the right thing by the common folk. I mean, Mysaria gave those gifts of food to the common people last season, and Sylvie and Diana spread whispers of dissent against the Greens last season. So Mysaria is trying to use the power of the commoners to help Rhaenyra, and is hoping that Rhaenyra will help the commoners. Daemon, meanwhile, doesn't give a fuck, I think. Daemon is more like, let's build a Dragon Lord empire, let's conquer the world and crush everyone beneath our scaly feet, let's make Rhaenyra the empress of the universe and fulfill the prophecy, and then maybe Viserys's ghost will finally love me. Daemon has very different ambitions to Mysaria, so I'm curious what it's going to be like for Queen Rhaenyra. Is she going to have Daemon on one shoulder saying, let's conquer the world, and then Mysaria on another shoulder saying, let's institute universal healthcare? That's the kind of vibe that I'm imagining with Rhaenyra, Mysaria, and Daemon. So that's the rivalry that they're setting up. So then we are with Alicent in King's Landing. So Alicent, of course, is the mother of Aegon and Aemond, the ex-wife of Viserys. And last season, Alicent realized that no one's ever going to take her seriously as queen. She doesn't have the power to try to rule through Aegon and Aemond. She's not able to drive this ship in a sane direction. And so ultimately she decides that she has to just try and end the war peacefully one way or another. And she doesn't want to be a politician anymore. She just wants to get out of Dodge. She just wants to make like a tree. And so last season, Alicent met with Rhaenyra secretly and said, hey, I'm done with this shit. Please just let me leave. Me and my daughter Helena and my granddaughter Jaehaera. Let us just run away and be free. You can deal with the politics. You can win the war. And Rhaenyra's like, hey, well, you know that I've got to kill your son Aegon. And Alicent sort of tearfully accepted that. Alicent did not specify what will happen to her other sons. She has her son, Aemond. She doesn't mention what will happen to Aemond. And there's the other son, Daeron, who we may or may not have seen yet. But her son, Daeron, who seems like a decent kid, we don't know what Alicent's plan is for them. It's a little unclear. But Alicent said that she would help Rhaenyra take King's Landing and take the throne. And so in this episode, step one is that Alicent goes and meets with Luther Largent. And Luther Largent is the commander of the Gold Cloaks. We're meeting him for the first time. In the books, Luther Largent is large. Largent is large. He is, quote, a bull of a man, nigh on 7 feet tall, rumored to have once killed a warhorse with a single punch. So Alicent comes and meets the police commissioner, and he says, Rhaenyra is coming, and I want you to surrender to Rhaenyra. And Luther does help Rhaenyra in the end. I think that it's a little bit silly that Daemon doesn't think to talk to the Gold Cloaks, because in season 1, Daemon was the commander of the Gold Cloaks. The Gold Cloaks were fiercely loyal to him, And in the end, it is partly Luthor and the Gold Cloaks' loyalty to Daemon. That's why the Gold Cloaks do help Daemon in the end here. I think it's kind of silly that Daemon doesn't do this, because in the books, that's what happens. Like, in the books, the moment the Gold Cloaks see Caraxes in the sky, the moment the Gold Cloaks see Daemon's dragon, they're like, hell yeah, Daemon's here, let's help him out. We're on his side. And Luthor, like, yeah, he immediately goes and sides with Daemon, and someone accuses him of being a turncloak, of being a traitor. And Luthor says, quote, Daemon gave us these cloaks, and they're gold no matter how you turn them. So it's a neat line in the books. So yeah, Alicent goes down to like the bathhouse, and like people sort of smirk at her because, you know, the queen is seeing these naked men standing around in the cop shop sauna, and people sort of smirk at her, which I think is sort of part of a pattern throughout this episode where Alicent is kind of sexualized. I mean, you know, like Jasper attempts to rape Alicent this episode, but I think also, like, you know, the way that people smirk at her in this bathhouse is sort of part of that pattern where she's being treated differently because she's a woman. Like, if she was a man, no one would be smirking at her for being here, I don't think. So the continued like gendered treatment is what Alicent's arc is about in this episode, I think. So yeah, Alicent is helping Rhaenyra by getting the Gold Cloaks to side with her. In one sense, she's heroically preventing violence, but in another sense, Alicent is betraying her own children. And by helping Rhaenyra, she's probably going to get Aegon and Aemond killed. So it's a morally complicated choice. And this is a very different thing to the books. In the books, the Gold Cloaks, yeah, just independently decide to side with Daemon. But also, like, Alicent helps defend the city in the books. Quote, it fell to the Queen Dowager, Alicent, to see to the city's defences. Queen Alicent rose to the challenge, closing the gates of castle and city, sending the Gold Cloaks to the walls, and dispatching riders on swift horses to find Prince Aemond and fetch him back. In the books, Alicent unambiguously hates Rhaenyra and wants her family dead. But the show's telling a very different story. So Alicent has these secret meetings trying to help Rhaenyra take the city. And her sworn protector is Rickard Thorne, who says, like, hey, are you having secret meetings to do treason against Team Green? I kind of wish you'd stop doing that. And Alicent's like, nah, go away. This is what I'm doing. And so, you know, like I said, it puts Rickard Thorne in a difficult position because Rickard is sworn to obey Queen Alicent, but he's also sworn loyalty to Team Green and to Aegon and Aemond. And Aegon and Aemond aren't here, but presumably Aegon and Aemond don't want Rhaenyra to take the city. So Rickard is in a genuinely difficult position. And ultimately, Rickard betrays Alicent, and he tells Jasper Wilde what Alicent is up to. Which almost gets Alicent, ultimately Alicent does get captured. So it's a difficult position that Rickard's in, and Rickard, like Laurent, ultimately betrays the woman and sides with the men instead, continuing the sexism theme. So, Daemon is back on Dragonstone, and he speaks with Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra has locked herself in her room, overwhelmed with grief for Jace. There's a lot of this in the books. In the books, after the death of Luke in season 1, Rhaenyra is, quote, broken. She's grief sick. She just, like, stays in her room grieving, and she lets Corlys and Rhaenys and Jace lead the team. Like, all through, like, season 2, in the books, Rhaenyra is not doing much. She's basically letting Jace and Corlys lead her team. But after Jace's death, Rhaenyra feels hardened. Jace's death burns away Rhaenyra's fears, leaves only her anger and her hatred. So that's where she's at in the books. In the show, it's a bit different. But yeah, they talk about Sheep Stealer, and Rhaenyra talks about just the tragic, stupid irony of everything that's happening. Because, like, Aemond says, hey, good news. Aemond and Vhagar left King's Landing, so, like, the throne is ours for the taking. We can finally take the throne. And, like, you know, a season ago, this would have been great news. But after the death of Luke and Jace, it's like, what's the point? Like, Rhaenyra would not have wanted any of this if she knew that Jace and Luke would die like this. And she has this line about the irony of it all. The boys who hid their little faces in my skirts are dead, so that I may sit upon a throne of swords. Like, it's similar to that line from Simon Strong last season, where Simon says, "Oh, what's the Iron Throne? Oh, it's a chair made of swords." Like these sort of glib, ironic descriptions of the throne show how silly and meaningless this all is. Like, after seeing Rhaenyra mourn for Jace in that earlier scene, it's like, how could anyone care about a throne in the face of parents losing their children, you know? It's absurd. And so again, this episode is all about the terrible cost of victory. So, you know, Daemon is somewhat sympathetic to Rhaenyra's grief, somewhat. But his eyes are on the prize, and so he's like, hey, like, let's not let Jace die in vain. And he starts to speak to her in Valyrian. So remember in season 1, episode 1, Daemon spoke to Rhaenyra in Valyrian. That's the language of the ancient Dragon Lord Empire. That is the language of their, like, ancient progenitors, the first Dragon Lords, the great empire, the ambitions, the dreams. Like, that's what Daemon's channeling by speaking in this language. And so Daemon says that, hey, like, I saw visions of the future at Harrenhal last season. Daemon saw the White Walkers. He saw Rhaenyra on the throne. He saw Emilia Clarke, the darkness in the north, the song of ice and fire. A girl with silver hair in a desert far away with dragons at her breast. So that's Daenerys in season 1, episode 10. And so Daemon is saying, the vision is true. The prophecy is true. Rhaenyra is the chosen one who must hold the throne to save the world from the White Walkers. And this is what Viserys was saying since season 1, episode 1. It is, like, interesting that they bring up Daenerys, though, isn't it? Because my impression up till now was that Viserys and Rhaenyra believed that Rhaenyra must unite the realm now so that she can save the world from the White Walkers. That's the sense that I got. But now that Daemon is saying there's going to be this other girl in a faraway desert and she's going to have dragons, it's like, do they think that Rhaenyra is the chosen one who'll save the world? Or do they think Daenerys is the chosen one who'll save the world? And is Daenerys the chosen one who'll save the world? Because in Game of Thrones Season 8, it's Arya who kills the Night King. So, the whole prophecy business is puzzling in the TV shows for me. In the books, it seems like things are going in a different direction. But, this does fit a pattern in the books and the shows where it seems like many Targaryens have these prophetic visions, have these beliefs, have these dreams. And since the Targaryens are mostly like egomaniacs, they tend to think, oh, I am the chosen one. I am the one who will save the world from the White Walkers. And usually they're wrong. So, like, Rhaegar Targaryen is a classic example. Aegon, I won't give too many spoilers, but it seems like there are many Targaryens who, like, think themselves to be the hero. And most of them are wrong. So ultimately this seems to get through to Rhaenyra, and so she does decide that she's going to take King's Landing. And I think what really changes Rhaenyra's mind is that Daemon mentions Viserys. It was Viserys who told Rhaenyra the prophecy. And I think that as much as we're talking about these abstract magical prophecies, we're also talking about Rhaenyra's love for her father Viserys and Daemon's love for his brother Viserys. It's so funny that Viserys is fundamentally such a mediocre person. Like, Viserys was a bad king, and Viserys was a bad father, especially to Aegon and Aemond and Helena. And Viserys was a bad husband to Alicent. And yet Viserys' memory looms large, and Rhaenyra and Daemon are talking positively of Viserys, and Otto talks about Viserys before his death this episode. Like, everyone is really kind of still acting out of love for Viserys, even though Viserys' misrule is what caused this war in so many ways. So it's a messy situation. Thank you for the generous super chat from Matt Shu, who says, this episode was definitely a step up from season 2. Finally, things are happening. My biggest gripe is the scene with Alicent and Jasper Wilde. I'm happy that they're giving Alicent agency, but is more unwritten and unnecessary assault needed? What do you say, Lord Shift? Yeah, well, I think that I mean, yeah, we'll get to the Jasper thing. I think that it's consistent with what this story is about, which is like exploring different forms of sexism. And like Alicent's story in particular has been one horror after another, where it seems like everyone around her is a rapist or just a fucking exploitative asshole. And part of it is that Alicent is fundamentally always viewed as a sexual object. No matter how much she wants to be seen as a politician and someone who wields power, she's seen as a sexual object. And I think all of the ugliness and the worst sides of that and the assaults come out in war. I mean, Jasper says as much. Like, Jasper says, you know, in this darkness, as we are falling down into the abyss, we will grab at what pleasure we can. And so, like, it mirrors the rape in the previous episode where that soldier raped a woman in Gwaine and Kristen's army. And so this is something that you know, George and the shows have always been writing about, is like the horrific, ugly side of war. Episode 1 showed us like the fun, glorious side of war with, you know, Shariko and Corlys and Alan's badass duel and the ships crashing together. And now we see like the flip side to that. And so much of that violence is directed at the women as well as the soldiers. So I think it's consistent with all of that. But yeah, it certainly adds another ugly, depressing episode in a series of ugly, depressing episodes. And it's no wonder Alicent wants to get the fuck out of Westeros. We'll respond to most of your super chats and donations towards the end of the stream. And if you do want to ask a question, the best way to do it is using the Streamlabs link in the video description rather than the super chat feature, because YouTube takes a large percentage of the super chats. So, oh yeah, we are up to the Jasper scene. So yeah, so Lord Jasper Wilde, he's nicknamed Iron Rod. Like that's kind of one of the ironic and depressing things about this, is that, so like, Jasper Wilde is kind of a whimsical character. He's got the nickname Iron Rod because he had many children by many women. And so in the books, he kind of feels like a fun character in one sense. And that sort of like whimsy of being nicknamed after a sex joke becomes very not funny when he is a rapist. And I think it's like this depressing thing where like the guy who makes sex his identity turns out to be a fucking sex criminal. And, you know, it also fits this pattern of these powerful men are sexually exploitative. It's like Laris. I mean, it's like everyone in Alicent's life. Like Laris was exploiting Alicent, like masturbating to her feet. Viserys had sex with Alicent when she didn't want to have sex. Otto pushed Alicent into that relationship in the first place. And Otto, like, sort of weirdly objectified Alicent sometimes. Like, there were scenes when Alicent was trying to talk about politics, and Otto would just say, "Oh, you look so much like your mother in that dress." And it's like, fucking hell. And Alicent's son, Aegon, raped Diana. Alicent's son, Aemond, just kissed her last episode. And so, it's just part of that pattern of how Alicent's desperately trying to get shit done and be respected as a queen, and no one fucking listens. And so ultimately, in the end, people are deferring to the men, not to the queen, just like a similar problem that Rhaenyra is having. Like, Rhaenyra is taking a different path. Like Alicent was trying to rule openly, and no one listened, so now she's trying to conspire in secret, like plotting with the gold cloaks and using Helena to order the Scorpion men. You know, Rhaenyra is taking a different path to be try to be taken seriously. Like, she's wielding a sword, she's flying in with a dragon, she's trying to be direct and martial and violent, she's cutting off heads. And it doesn't really work for her either. Like, still, like, men laugh at Rhaenyra when she draws a sword. So all through the show, like, Alicent and Rhaenyra have tried to use, they've tried to find ways to wield power as women, and they've taken very different strategies, but they're getting similar results, which is they're not very successful. They still have very few men who actually follow them, and so Rhaenyra is still dependent on Daemon as a leader, and Alicent has no men by her side. Like, Orwyle kind of helps her, but he's not willing to go full treason with her. So, yeah, it's a complicated, messy, ugly episode in a series of messy, ugly episodes. So, in the same way that Rhaenyra kind of ultimately needs Daemon to save her, Alicent needs Orwyle to save her. Orwyle comes and interrupts and saves Alicent from being raped. And it's like, of course, you know, Orwyle does not have more authority than Queen Alicent, and yet it seems to be that the men need a man to tell them to arrest Ironrod instead. It is kind of ironic that Orwyle is having Jasper arrested, because in the previous episode, Orwyle was about to have his head cut off by Aemond, and it was Ironrod who came and interrupted and saved Orwyle. So last episode, Ironrod saved Orwyle, and now Orwyle gets Ironrod arrested and then gets him executed by Daemon. And of course, previously, Orwyle helped Alicent sneak off to Dragonstone for a secret meeting. So Orwyle has helped Alicent in the past, but yeah, he doesn't go along with Alicent's complete treason. So yeah, it's just desperation, and it's sort of extra depressing that, you know, Alicent has just like had a rape attempt. She's just been assaulted, and she gets no time to like process this or deal with this, because it's on to the next crisis. It's running around with Helena, and it just adds to the pile of traumatic experiences that Alicent has just had to move on through. So yeah, I hope she gets the fuck out of Westeros. So Rhaenyra emerges from her bedroom and says, all right, fuck it, I'm taking the throne. There's a wonderful dramatic shot of the firelight on her face, half in light, half in darkness. Let's remember that all through Game of Thrones Season 8, there was this whole question of, will Rhaenyra attack King's Landing with dragons? And it was kind of this odd thing where everyone was saying, if Daenerys attacks King's Landing with dragons, thousands of innocent people will burn. And that never really made sense to me. Like, it always seemed to me that you could just fly some dragons to the Red Keep. Maybe you have to burn some scorpions, some ballistae on the walls, but you could totally, just burn the Red Keep at most. Like, you could keep casualties pretty low, I would think. And that is what Rhaenyra does in this episode. Game of Thrones Season 8 was very weird, but you don't need me to tell you that. But yeah, Rhaenyra says, all right, fuck it, I'm taking the throne. And the useless ditherers of Dragonstone, Bartimaeus Celtigar and Gerardus, say, no, you can't go and take the throne because you won't have guards and it might be dangerous. And Rhaenyra's like, I'm the queen, I don't need to listen to you. I feel like this would have been a really satisfying climax to Season 2, because originally Season 2 was meant to be 10 episodes long, but they changed it from 10 episodes to 8 episodes. And so these two first episodes of Season 3, Season 3 Episode 1, Season 3 Episode 2, they kind of are really the final 2 episodes of the previous season. Like, this episode is really kind of the finale of Season 2. And I think so many of the arcs work better as conclusions to Season 2 rather than at the beginning of Season 3. Because Rhaenyra spent so much of Season 2 in this council room being told, no, you can't do anything. And Rhaenyra saying, what would you have me do? I think that Rhaenyra's decision to just go ham and take the throne would have been great if it was at the end of Season 2 rather than the beginning of Season 3. And that applies to many of the arcs. But yeah, they made the changes that they made. I love Rhaenyra's look right now, because Rhaenyra's eyes are dark from weeping for Jace. She is a mourning mother. Like, her outfit is dark, it's black. She's in mourning for her son, but she's also wearing armor and she's wearing a sword, and so she looks like masculine. Like she was saying last episode, that Elizabeth quote about the feeble body of a woman but the heart of a king. Rhaenyra is trying to show she has the heart of a king. She can play the role of a man. In her quest to be taken seriously as a ruler, she's taking on like this masculine appearance while also still having tears in her eyes from her dead son. So I like how, she's simultaneously the mother and the queen and the king and the warrior. She's trying to like combine these images. So it's all part of this ongoing dialogue about gender. And she looks badass. So yeah, she finally disregards her counselors and flies to war. Mysaria gives her her crown and tries to tell her to listen to Mysaria and not listen to Daemon. And she flies off to take the throne. I think that Rhaenyra's body language is interesting. Like, Rhaenyra has this sort of hunched posture. She's sort of like leaning down and hunched. And I think it's this, like, she's in mourning. She's down. She's been beaten down. She's weak. She's down, but she's also like angry and glowering and physical and on her feet and wanting to strike. I don't know. I think there's Awesome physicality to Emma Darcy's performance. In the books, Rhaenyra wears, quote, a suit of gleaming black scale. And I think it's a shame that we don't get to see that. I would like to see Rhaenyra... Like, I do like this outfit, but I would like to see her wearing more, like, armor. Like, Daemon's armor. Daemon's, like, plate armor here is so cool. There have been lots of really cool suits of armor in House of the Dragon and in A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. I would like to see some of the women wearing it. Like Daenerys in Game of Thrones never wore armor, which is such a shame. Like, it would look so cool if she did, and it would also be very sensible with all those arrows flying at you, you know? But alas. Daemon is again rude to Ulf and Hugh, and Daemon again says, don't make decisions, don't have ideas, don't engage in thinking. And you can really see that backfiring, right? Like, Daemon is telling Ulf and Hugh, don't think, don't make decisions. What if there's a situation where Ulf and Hugh do need to make a decision, and they're like, well, Daemon told us not to make decisions, not to have ideas, so we better do nothing. I think that Daemon's treatment of Ulf and Hugh obviously may backfire. In the books, Daemon and Rhaenyra and Ulf and Hugh are also joined by Nettles on the Dragon Sheepstealer. She's not in the show. And they're also joined by Adam and Seasmoke. It's funny that Adam seems to avoid Daemon's wrath this episode. Like, Adam abandoned the mission to kill Vhagar near Harrenhal as well. Adam is as guilty as Ulf and Hugh, but Adam is not here. Adam is out looking for Corlys. And so Adam isn't around, so he doesn't get this harsh talking to from Daemon. So Adam's just kind of lucky that he's not there to get chastised like this, isn't he? So Alicent continues to try to plan an escape and to help Rhaenyra get out of take over King's Landing, and she finds Helaena looking at a caterpillar. Remember that Helaena, since season 1, has always been a big fan of bugs. She used to be playing with millipedes, and she had those crickets that she had in cages in season 2. Helena's one great passion seems to be animals. And she makes this comment that there's something strange about this caterpillar. It isn't the season. Tell me in the comments what you think that means. It isn't the season. I think that's curious. I mean, the seasons, the literal seasons, are mysterious in this world because, like, summer and winter are sometimes years long, and they are irregular. They're inconsistent. And sometimes there are long winters that kill people. And the seasons are sometimes connected to magic. Sometimes magic is stronger, sometimes it's weaker. It isn't the season. This is strange. It feels like something's in the water, something's askew, something's wrong, something's changing. That's the sense that we get. It reminds me of Alice's cryptic comment that Daemon's arrival heralds the end of many things. You get a sense that the tide is changing. I mean, Rhaenyra is taking the throne, so, like, the war is certainly changing. But I wonder if, like, magical forces are changing as well, with Alice and the Green Men and the dragons and everything. These are strange times, and the caterpillars are misbehaving. So Alicent says, hey, we've got to tell the men to allow Rhaenyra to take the city because you're the queen, and we've got to use your authority. So this seems to be like the first time in the entire show that anyone has ever asked Helaena to, like, use her power and to be more than an object, but to be like a ruler. And she seems to be quite surprised by the notion that she might have power. And there's a very cute little arc here where Helaena gets to assert herself. And to the men, she says that, I will not allow any beast to be harmed, and I want to have chickens. Helaena, as queen, has very firm positions on chickens and caterpillars. What a queen she would be. Wouldn't it be wonderful if Helaena was the queen of Westeros and she got to protect all chickens and caterpillars? What a world it would be. But yeah, Alicent sort of does some exposition. There's sort of an expository scene where Alicent explains what's on her mind, and she thinks that, well, maybe Viserys didn't want Aegon to be king, and, I don't really care about the war anymore. I just want to save Helaena. She says that she wants to make Helaena happy. And it seems to be the first time anyone has ever asked Helena what she wants or what would make her happy. And yeah, she says she wants to keep chickens, which is delightful. What a better life that would be. Alicent says that she may redeem Helena, which is like, I think the implication is that Alicent feels that her sons Aegon and Aemond are irredeemable. Aegon and Aemond have both done evil things, and I think Alicent believes that she can't help them anymore. The world's better if Aegon and Aemond die, which is pretty wild. Her other son, Daeron, is still out there. I'm curious what she thinks will happen to Daeron. But her great hope is to run off with Helena and Jaehaera, Helena's daughter. And the word redeem is a little messed up because it sort of implies that Helena needs redemption, as though Helena has done anything wrong in her life, which she hasn't. But that's what she says. And so they go up to the walls and they tell the men manning the walls not to attack Rhaenyra, not to shoot Rhaenyra's dragons with the scorpion bolts, with the authority of Queen Helena and Queen Alicent. And I think that she also plays on the men's fear. Like, Alicent is saying, like, hey, do you really want to get burned by these dragons? Because that's what's going to happen. Helena says that Rhaenyra's sons were always kind, because we did see Jace and Luke being kind or decent to Helena in Season 1. It's such a shame because, like, Jace was almost betrothed to Helena. Like, what a better world it would be if Jace and Helena married. Jace would be a decent king, Helena could keep her chickens, like, it would be so much better, but that's not how things went. I like how they keep reminding us of Season 1, because I think that Season 1 was the strongest part of this show. It was a really good foundation for everything that follows. So I think it's smart of them to remind us of Season 1. So this thing on the walls, it makes sense to me. Like, I feel like the stuff with the gold cloaks and Alicent doesn't make as much sense. Because, the gold cloaks were always aligned with Daemon, and it's sort of silly that Daemon doesn't use that. But Alicent telling the men, like, on the walls of the Red Keep to not shoot at Rhaenyra makes sense, because, like, the scorpions are a real threat to Rhaenyra. We have seen scorpion bolts kill dragons, so this bit makes some sense to me. Meanwhile, Criston and Gwaine Hightower are in this army of Crownlanders, Rosbys, Stokeworths, et al., and they see Aemond's dragon Vhagar flying overhead. So Aemond has finally joined them, and they're going to attack Harrenhal together, which was the plan from the start. So off they march, and as Vhagar approaches Harrenhal, a bunch of bats fly away. So Harrenhal is partly infested with bats. I think Simon Strong said last season that some parts of Harrenhal are inaccessible because of the quantities of bat guano filling the halls. And Aemond burns a bunch of people at Harrenhal. It's not clear to me if this is the garrison left behind by Daemon, or if this is the extra garrison that Daemon ordered in the previous scene this episode. But in any case, these are like rivermen who are garrisoning the castle loyal to Rhaenyra, and Aemond kills them, and he just sort of burns Harrenhal a bunch for good measure. So Harrenhal was built 130 years ago by Harrenhal the Black, and immediately Aegon the Conqueror turned up and burned Harren and his sons and the castle. And so the greatest, biggest castle in Westeros melted like a candle and fell to bits, and now it's a blasted, demon-haunted ruin that represents the hubris and the arrogance of man brought low. And Aemond sort of reenacts that by burning Harrenhal some more. And Aemond gets off and fights a bunch of these men, and he thinks he looks very cool, and he does look very cool in his armor and his jewel-wielding blades. And so he's having a great time stabbing people, living out his fantasies. And all of this mirrors Daemon's capture of Harrenhal last season. Last season we saw Daemon take the castle. And Daemon was really like wanting a fight last season, but he didn't get one. He just got Simon Strong offering him goose. Aemond gets a bit more of a fight. So he kills a bunch of men and he meets Simon Strong. And Aemond wants more of a fight. Simon refuses to fight because he's a nice old man, and Aemond kills him, and it's really sad. In the books, it emphasizes how Aemond is mad because Aemond came here expecting to fight Daemon. But when Aemond arrives, he realizes that Daemon tricked him, And Daemon wanted to lure Aemond to Harrenhal so that Daemon could then sneak around and take King's Landing with Rhaenyra. They were tricking Aemond. Aemond hosts a whole victory feast at Harrenhal before he realizes that he was tricked. And so then Aemond gets all mad, and Aemond demands a duel with Simon Strong, and it's this farcical, ugly duel where Aemond easily butchers Simon. And then Aemond methodically executes all of the Strongs, every man, woman, and child, until there's a pile of their heads 3 feet tall, until the only remaining Strongs are Larys Strong, off with Aegon, and Alice Rivers, who is rumoured to be a bastard of Simon Strong. So Aemond in the books reckons that Larys is a traitor, and Larys must have told Daemon about his plans to go to Harrenhal. Everyone's always suspecting Larys of shenanigans. And so Aemond in the show, he kills Simon, he kills Simon's gormless sons, but one of the gormless sons manages to stab Aemond, and Aemond realizes that he's wounded quite badly, and then he scrabbles around on the ground and begs Alice for help. I feel like Aemond must feel very embarrassed to have been wounded by one of the least fearsome characters in this world, one of the gormless sons. So the question is, what is Alice going to do with Aemond? Because Aemond is evil. Aemond has murdered a lot of civilians, and last season Alice objected to the murder of civilians. Alice also assassinated Lord Grover Tully, so I think it would make sense if Alice just decided to kill Aemond, because Aemond is a danger to everybody around him. But maybe Alice will try to reform Aemond, like how Alice changed Daemon with all of those visions and such. Daemon just refused to give Harrenhal to Alice, so maybe Alice will switch sides. Maybe she'll join Team Green, and maybe she'll hope that Aemond will give her Harrenhal. Alice is mysterious indeed, and I'm very curious to see how she gets along with Aemond. So, then we are at King's Landing. The dragons are coming, and it's rad. On the ground, we see a bunch of civilians that we're familiar with. We see Cat, who is the wife of Hugh. This is Cat. Remember that Hugh and Cat had a daughter who died last season, and Cat told Hugh, please don't go and ride a dragon, please don't join this war, let's go to Tumbleton instead and hang out with our family. But Hugh went against his wife and claimed a dragon, and I believe that is Vermithor. That is Hugh's dragon that Cat is looking at. And then we see Muja and Clay, who are some of the drinking buddies of Ulf, who we saw last season, and they look up and see Ulf's dragon, Silverwing. And then we see Sylvie. Sylvie is the sex worker who was a lover of Aemond since Aemond's childhood in Season 1. And we saw Sylvie with Aemond again in Season 2. And then Sylvie was working with Diana and Mysaria to spread rumors against Team Green. So Sylvie's a bit of a political agent now as well. Very curious to see what role Sylvie has this season. And the dragons take King's Landing, and look, it's pretty spectacular. It looks pretty rad. We haven't seen dragons above King's Landing since Game of Thrones. Well, we haven't seen dragons take King's Landing since Game of Thrones Season 8. And we see the Greens opening the gates for Team Black as Alicent instructed. I'm not sure why they need the gates to be opened, because dragons fly over walls, but that's what happens. And Daemon and Rhaenyra go in and take the throne. And there's a bit of a sense of a suicide mission here. I mean, we know that Daemon loves a good suicide mission. We saw in Season 1, Episode 3, when Daemon just went and fought a bajillion Triarchy men and killed the crab feeder. Like, that was a crazy, like, suicide mission, like 1 versus 100 sort of a fight that Daemon did. He loves this shit. Like, the bit where Rickard and the Greens, like, stand between Daemon and the throne, Daemon's sort of doing the math in his head, and he's like, can I win a 1v12 fight? Maybe. I might die, but I would look pretty cool if I die fighting 12 people for the throne. Like Daemon, I think, is kind of loving this. Whereas Rhaenyra is standing there with her sword, and she's like, "Huh, I sure wish that someone trained me to use a sword at some point. I sure wish I knew how to use this thing." And I think there's a sort of sense of Rhaenyra wishes that she was Daemon. There is a line where Rhaenyra wishes that she was like Daemon. Because as a man, Daemon can have sex with whoever he wants. And as a man, he's been trained to use a sword. He has more freedom. He has more power. And Rhaenyra wishes that she had all those privileges right now. So it's really interesting the way that Rhaenyra observes Daemon. I think it's a lot like how Cersei looks at Jaime in the books. Like, there's that whole interesting dynamic where it's like, does Cersei love Jaime, or does Cersei just wish that she was Jaime so that she could be more powerful and more free? And so yeah, this is kind of an absurd thing to do, to just walk into the Red Keep with just Rhaenyra and Daemon. Like, this seems like a very dangerous choice. I think that partly, like, Rhaenyra just lost her son Jace. Like, that just happened. Rhaenyra was just, like, weeping in her room for her dead son, and I think there's an element of suicide mission from Rhaenyra as well. I mean, Rhaenyra spent a whole season in Season 2 trying to be strategic, trying to avoid war, trying to be sensible, trying to be conservative, trying to play it safe, and now she's like, well, none of that worked. The politics didn't work, the hesitance didn't work, hedging my bets didn't work. Now my son's dead. Fuck it. I'm taking the throne. I'm using my dragons. I'm killing anyone who'll stop me. Like, I think that's the mentality here. From both, and Daemon, like, this is what Daemon wanted all along. Daemon wanted to do this in Season 1, Episode 10. And in a way, maybe Daemon was right. Like, they could have done this in Season 1, Episode 10. Like, they could have gone and just fought Vhagar with what dragons they had and taken the throne. It might have worked, and it might have saved Jace and Luke. It's sort of this self-fulfilling prophecy thing, where Daemon and many of the other men from the start were saying, there's going to be war, we've got to hit hard and hit first. Like, that's what Daemon was saying, that's what Otto was saying. And they kind of have been proved right, but only in a self-fulfilling prophecy way. It's because of the violent men that the war happened. You know, it was made inevitable by their choices. So now we're in this ugly mess. This violence is, it's a bit silly. It's a bit badass. I love how Daemon says, this is our house. We are the House of the Dragon. We are the Targaryens, the true Targaryens. Who are you to stand in our way? It is very badass. It is also quite video gamey and silly. The way that the Greens come at Daemon one by one, like, it's like a video game. He just easily takes these red shirts out. It's like, man, like, don't stand in single file. Personally, I didn't enjoy the Season 1 Episode 3 fight, where Daemon kills dozens of Triarchy men one by one. That felt a bit silly to me. I prefer when the violence in Game of Thrones feels a little bit more grounded, a little bit more real. That's the feeling in the books. Like, in the books, nobody is, like, single-handedly killing dozens of men one after the other. That shit doesn't happen in the books. The most, like, crazy badass fights like that in the books are, like, Brienne. Like, Brienne takes on, like, 7 men at one point, and she loses. She literally gets her face eaten off. And it is one of the most badass moments in the entire series. But, like, she loses. Because that's what happens when one person fights 7. The show leans more into, like, crazy, you know, over-the-top action. But the spectacle is fun sometimes. So Rhaenyra and Daemon fight their way through the Red Keep. They make it to the throne room. They're looking very badass. And finally, they reach the throne room. This is what they've been wanting for seasons and seasons. I mean, think of Season 1, Episode 1, when Daemon sat the throne. Rhaenyra said, "You're sitting in my chair." Like, there's always been this rivalry. And Daemon, true to his word, calls Rhaenyra Your Grace, helps her on her way to the throne. But I do love this, like, hand-holding. It's like Daemon is trying to stop Rhaenyra from taking the throne, but then she pulls out of his grasp. And so there's still tension here. There's still tension. And then before she takes the throne, there's a final boss, another wave of enemy troops. Like, were they hiding behind the pillars? This all feels a little bit goofy to me. But what I like about this bit is that Rickard Thorne is being a true Kingsguard knight. Like, Rickard Thorne is saying, look, I did not go along with Queen Alicent's treason. I am a Kingsguard knight. I am going to defend King Aegon's throne. Even though Aegon is gone and Aemond is gone and both of them are terrible, this is my interpretation of my duty as a Kingsguard knight. This is an irony that the series often explores. It's like how Barristan Selmy is like the greatest knight ever, but he was loyal to the Mad King and to Robert Baratheon. Shitty kings. These oaths are just not sufficient for a morally complex world. Rhaenyra draws her sword and the men laugh. So again, this show is about like all of the ways in which it is difficult for women to wield power in a patriarchal world. And it's like, even if Rhaenyra could use that sword, like she still would not be taken seriously in a world where women aren't expected to be warriors. And then the Gold Cloaks come in and help Rhaenyra and Daemon to win. It's very similar to in Game of Thrones Season 1. Remember when Ned was trying to get the throne for Stannis and to do the right thing, and then the Gold Cloaks betray Ned and help the Lannisters instead. It's a very similar moment. And so it was Alicent who talked to Luther Largent, who convinced the Gold Cloaks to help Rhaenyra, but also it's because of Daemon's relationship with the Gold Cloaks as their former commander. So Ricky's gambit did not pay off. And Rhaenyra wants Aegon because there's a bit of political theatre that needs to be happening here. In order to really take the throne and consolidate her power, Rhaenyra needs to demonstrate that she is the sole ruler, and the other claimants, the Greens, have been defeated. So she needs to, put some heads on spikes. That's how these things are done. She needs to redecorate, put up her own banners. And so they go and look for who's here. Of course, Aegon has already left, but they do find Orwyle. It's funny, in the books, they look for Aegon, but in Aegon's room, they find Aegon's bed empty and Aegon's chamber pot full. And so it's this sort of comedic moment where Aegon has unexpectedly disappeared. It would have been interesting if they kept that surprise, that sense of a twist in this episode, in the show. It would have been fun if we, the audience, if we didn't know that Aegon had left. They would have had to restructure the timing and the order of things a bit, but it might have been more fun that way. But Orwyle says, I don't know where Aegon is. Daemon threatens to execute Orwyle, which is funny because last episode, Aemond threatened to execute Orwyle. This guy just can't catch a break. But Orwyle says, hey, if you got to cut off someone's head, go and kill Jasper Wilde. He's in the dungeons. And so we see Alicent and Helena trying to escape, but they can't. I'm not entirely sure why, because Alicent and Helena, they were trying to open the gates, I suppose, around the Red Keep. But you'd think that Alicent and Helena, as the queens, might have the authority to order the Gold Cloaks at the gates to let them through. I would think that should be possible. The other option, of course, is that Helena has a dragon. Helena has a dragon called Dreamfire, who's in the dragon pit. I really feel like there should have at least been some dialogue here where Alicent is like, Helena, our only option is to fly off on your dragon. That's how we can escape and be safe. And maybe they try to go to the dragon pit, but it's too heavily guarded, or maybe Helena's afraid of Dreamfire or something. They've never explained what Helena's relationship is with Dreamfire. Because in the books, Helena loves riding Dreamfire. But in the show, we're told that Helena doesn't ride Dreamfire, and it's not really explained. So I'm very curious what's going on there. And I feel like this whole plot line with Alicent and Helena trying to escape, it feels a little bit contrived. It's very different to the books. So back in the Red Keep, Daemon goes to the dungeons, and he finds that Jasper Wilde is in there. He threatens to cut off Jasper's cock to relieve him of his iron rod, and he also gets contacted by this guy who works for Larys Strong. So Larys Strong was the Lord Confessor at one point. Remember when Larys cut the tongues out of those prisoners and used them to start fires for him in Season 1? I'm kind of curious what happened to those guys. Larys Strong is kind of like Mysaria in that he's had very wild fluctuations in what he's capable of. Larys had a network of spies in the Red Keep. In Season 2, it seemed as though everyone in the Red Keep worked for Larys, or at least was vetted by Larys. And you would think that would be relevant right now. Like, Laris should have an influence on who holds the Red Keep. Laris should have an influence on how easily Rhaenyra and Daemon took the castle. It's a bit silly to me that they're not acknowledging that. Maybe they'll acknowledge that next episode. Like, I think they should acknowledge the fact that all the servants in the Red Keep work for Laris, or at least they did. I feel like they should clarify that, because that was a big plot point. It used to be that the servants worked for, like, Mysaria, or some of them did. Then Laris took over. What's the status now? Do Mysaria and Laris still have spies in King's Landing? Unclear to me. I suppose Sylvie is still connected to Mysaria, maybe, but yeah, it's all a bit unclear. I wish they clarified it. I think it's just a consequence of there's a lot of characters in this show, and it's difficult to adapt the books in a way that makes the main characters important, because many of the characters in the books aren't important for long stretches of time. And so they sort of need to give plot points to other characters. Like, they're giving some of Daemon and Laris's plot points to Alicent to make Alicent more relevant, which is good for Alicent's arc, but it makes Daemon and Laris make less sense. So that's the sort of tricky adaptational choices they're having to make. Anyway, so this goofy dungeon fella says, "Hey, I've got a present for you from Laris. It's Otto Hightower." So we last saw Otto in House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 2. And Otto said, I'll go to Highgarden, and I'll get the Tyrells of Highgarden to side with us. And so then he disappeared, and it was a mystery where Otto was. And this is different to the books, so no one knew. No one knew where Otto was, and there were theories like maybe Otto had been captured by House Beesbury, which could have been fun. Maybe, Otto was going to link up with Ormond Hightower. There were different theories, but turns out that Otto has been in the Red Keep, in King's Landing, in the dungeons this whole time, which is quite funny. And so it seems that Laris captured Otto and imprisoned Otto just as a way to get on the good side of Team Black. So Laris is continuing to play both sides. Like, Laris is pretending to help Aegon, but he's also gifting Otto to Rhaenyra to try and get on Rhaenyra's good side. So Laris is trying to make sure that no matter who wins the war, Laris will benefit. And let's not forget that Laris is the Lord of Harrenhal. That big castle is Laris's castle. And so Jace promised Harrenhal to the Freys, but Alice wants Harrenhal, and Laris is the Lord of Harrenhal. It's so funny that everyone's always fighting over Harrenhal, even though it's kind of useless because it's so big that it's impossible to maintain, and it's extremely cursed and full of bat poo, but everyone wants it. Hubris. Folly. Anyway, so Otto gets captured, and Daemon is delighted, because Daemon has hated Otto for a very long time. Mostly out of rivalry for Viserys, I suppose. But, Daemon was always provoking Otto and creating chaos and insulting Otto. And Otto was always terrified that Daemon would get the throne. And now that's happening. Now Daemon and Rhaenyra are getting to the throne, and a war has happened. Everything that Otto hoped to avoid has happened, partly because of Otto's choices feeding the war. But yeah, Daemon is delighted that he seems to have won his long rivalry with Otto. But first, we face Jasper Wilde. Oh, we also get to see Lady Fell and Lord Merryweather. So in Season 1, Lord Merryweather and Lady Fell were imprisoned by Otto and the Greens because Merryweather and Fell refused to switch sides and support the Greens, because Merryweather and Fell and many of these lords had sworn to obey Rhaenyra. Viserys declared that Rhaenyra was the heir, and many of the lords in the Crown Lands switched sides and supported Aegon instead, but Fell and Merryweather remained loyal to Rhaenyra, so Rhaenyra now thanks them for their loyalty. So often what happens in these regime changes is that the new ruler might reward the loyalists by giving them power and castles and titles, and might punish the traitors by taking away their power and privileges. And it's always tricky to choose who you reward and how much. That's some of the stuff that Rhaenyra is going to have to deal with next episode, I think. So Rhaenyra faces Otto And Otto really is like the architect of this war in a lot of ways. Because remember, it was Otto who pushed his daughter Alicent to marry Viserys. It was Otto who pushed for Alicent's son Aegon to be the next king. Otto was plotting with Team Green to make Aegon king. Even before Alicent said that Viserys changed his mind, Otto organized the coronation. It's always been Otto pushing for his grandson Aegon to be king. So in a lot of ways, this war is his fault. And I kind of wish they talked about that more. I mean, Rhys Ifans is one of the best actors in the show, in my opinion. I loved his scenes with Aegon in Season 2, Episode 2. But he doesn't get to say much here. He does bring up Viserys, which is great. Because I think that Otto, he manipulated and exploited Viserys, but I think that he also cared about Viserys. And Daemon and Rhaenyra love Viserys. So again, like, Viserys is here. Viserys' ghost is in this room. He's still so important. And Daemon says, all right, well, we've got to kill Otto. They want to execute someone to symbolize the change of regime, to show that Rhaenyra is in charge. And so Rhaenyra decides to execute Otto, but she is hesitant. She's never cut off someone's head before. She's never been trained to use a sword. And, you know, it's really kind of awkward. It's not good that she's being hesitant, because she's got an audience. All of these courtiers and lords and ladies are watching her. And if she wants to be a respected ruler, she's got to show strength and decisiveness, but she's hesitating. And when she does cut off Otto's head, she kind of botches it. She, like, cuts into his back before she manages to cut into his neck, which I think is a very bad omen. I mean, Rhaenyra failing to execute Otto cleanly, it's similar to how Viserys tries to kill that stag in Season 1, Episode 3. Viserys does a bad job of killing the stag, and it's ugly, and it's messy, and it's a bad omen. So this is not a great start to Rhaenyra's reign in terms of optics. And I love how mournful it is. I like how, like, Otto's not angry. He's not angry and yelling like Jasper is. He's just sad that it's come to this. Because as he says, like, Viserys would be so upset to see this happen. Viserys does not want to see his family tear itself apart. But because of Viserys' misrule, and because of Otto, and because of Alicent and Rhaenyra, everyone is losing. Everyone's family is falling apart. There's also quite a lot of snot coming out of Rhaenyra's nose. Which adds to the sort of messiness and indignity and just sort of realness of it all, I suppose. Rhaenyra is a hot mess. And at a time that you want to be projecting strength, I mean, she's grieving the death of her son. And so it's that collision of the human and the political. So Rhaenyra finally takes the throne. She does the thing. She becomes the Queen of Westeros. And it sucks. And this is the story that George Martin tells over and over. We achieve our dreams, but it doesn't turn out the way we hoped. It's more complicated than we thought. I think one of the key questions this season is, who must Rhaenyra become in order to rule? At what cost does she become queen? Can she remain fully human and become the ruler? I think those are some of the relevant questions here. And another question is Rhaenyra a good politician? Will she be taken seriously as a ruler? Will she make good decisions? I mean, of course, you know, Aegon was a terrible fucking ruler. Aemond would be a terrible ruler. Viserys was a terrible ruler. But there's a sense that that Rhaenyra is not going to hold on to the throne unless she can be very good at it. And the other question is, who can Rhaenyra trust? Can she trust Aemond? Can she trust Mysaria? Can she trust her dragon riders? Who has she got? So these are all interesting questions. It's very sad and fucked up that Jasper Wilde mentions his wife before he gets killed by Daemon. Jasper tried to rape Alicent this episode, and now he's talking about his wife, just adding to the evil and hypocrisy of it all. But yeah, Rhaenyra's taken the throne. And it shows these like bloody footprints as she's approaching the throne. And I think those bloody footprints obviously symbolize the violence and loss and grief and the sacrifices that have been made to get Rhaenyra onto the throne. She's changed. She's a different person now. She's become a killer. She's become a warrior, or at least a wielder of a sword. She's experienced the loss of her children. Her hands are bloodied. She's done secret meetings and dishonorable bullshit. She's lied. And now she's a ruler. What happens next? And then Alicent walks in. Alicent Hightower walks in. And so, like, this show has always been centered around Alicent and Rhaenyra's relationship. And so the question now is, like, what is their relationship now? Alicent did help Rhaenyra take the throne. Alicent did keep her word to help Rhaenyra. Alicent did say that Aegon would be here and that Rhaenyra could kill Aegon, but Aegon fled. So that doesn't happen. So I wonder, will Rhaenyra be angry at Alicent? Will Rhaenyra accuse Alicent of lying? Of tricking Rhaenyra, of helping Aegon escape? I kind of hope not, because I feel like the show has added a lot of misunderstandings and a lot of accidents and a lot of misinterpretations, like, you know, Aemond accidentally killing Luke and Alicent misunderstanding Viserys's last words and Rhaena accidentally burning her own team. There's a lot of, like, accident that happens in the show that isn't in the books. But I'm very curious what this relationship is. Because, again, in the books, Alicent and Rhaenyra hate each other. They want to murder each other's families. There is no love in the books, as written. But it's so much more complicated in the show, and I think there is still love here. So, you know, will Rhaenyra let Alicent go? Will Rhaenyra execute Alicent? Will Alicent become an advisor to Rhaenyra? I think there's a lot of different possibilities, and I'm curious to see where it goes. I also think that Rhaenyra's sort of slow, awkward walk to the throne is similar to Viserys's slow, awkward walk to the throne. Like, I think Rhaenyra is becoming her father in a lot of ways. Like Rhaenyra is... Rhaenyra cares, and she doesn't want violence, and she loves her family, and she is maybe not making great political choices. And so in all those senses... Rhaenyra is like Viserys, which I think is a really fascinating comparison, because Rhaenyra does love Viserys, and a lot of what she's doing, I think she's doing for Viserys. And George, I think, often writes about how we become our parents. So, very curious about the Alicent-Rhaenyra relationship. I suspect that it might not be a good relationship, since Alicent is looking at her father Otto dead on the floor, which is not a great way to start a conversation. All right, so now I'm going to respond to some of your super chats and donations and things. Best way to do that is through Streamlabs link in the video description. But I'll remind you all that you can listen to Dragon Time. Dragon Time is a show discussing every episode of House of the Dragon. It gets a bit more silly and a bit more opinionated and a bit more speculative than Alt-Shift-X. There's also a separate chat, a sort of spoilery chat about what could happen in the future of Season 3, the weeks ahead chat, and the Dragon Time chat for this episode is 5 hours long, so you can get all the gosh darn Dragon Time that you can poke a stick at nebula.tv/AltShiftX. If you sign up to Nebula, it helps support this channel. It helps us keep making this stuff. And Dragon Time comes out right after each episode of House of the Dragon airs. You can also listen on podcast apps, podcast feeds, using the Nebula podcast feed. So we really appreciate it if you sign up. There's now over 80 hours of exclusive videos on Nebula with Alt-Shift-X and Glidus. So there's the fake Jon Snow talking about Kit Harington for 22 hours. There's Dragon Time chats about House of the Dragon Season 1, as well as Season 2 and Season 3. There's a bonus video about Dunk and Egg. There's also Alt-Shift-X chats about Ivanhoe and Attack on Titan. So if you want to see all that exclusive content, it's on Nebula, link below, and you can get 50% off an annual subscription using my link in the description. 50% off an annual subscription using the link in the description. Is that what I said? We've been talking for a long time. But hey, I'll now respond to your questions. Thank you to everyone who supports. Okay, so, and we're not yet in the spoiler zone. We'll get to a quick spoiler zone towards the end. So, thank you for the super chat from Olayo, aka Squeaky Boy, who says, I'm sure you've seen how toxic the discourse got after Season 2, and some folks may not give Season 3 a chance. Do you think Season 3 can win them over? For Dragon Time, do you see all of Season 3 early or one ep at a time? I think that to really sort of get the full feeling for Season 2, you got to see Season 3 Episode 1 and Season 3 Episode 2. Like, I feel like these 2 episodes are the finale to Season 2 that we never got. I feel like you can understand what they were going for with Season 2 better now that we've seen these 2 episodes. Like, I feel like if you're rewatching in future, you should watch Season 3 Episode 1 and Season 3 Episode 2 as part of Season 2. Like, it gives us the climax that we never got for Season 2. And I think that allows us to reevaluate Season 2 a bit. Will Season 3 win people over? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm curious to see where the rest of it goes. I think a lot of people dropped off. Like, I don't know the numbers, but I think that fewer people are watching Season 3 than were watching at the end of Season 1. But, yeah, we'll see what happens. For Dragon Time, yeah, Swifty and Glido, well, yeah, we do have early screeners, which we see, like, a few days before the episode releases officially. So that's cool. And for A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, we got the entire season early before the season even started, which was very cool. So yeah, we never quite know what's going to happen with the screeners. It's never guaranteed, but obviously it's helpful to be able to release stuff quickly. Thank you, Kermit the Frog, who says, I think the black dragon on the opening tapestry is Blackfire. It's at the end of the tapestry as a tease for future events. So the opening sequence shows this Targaryen sigil, and it's notable that this Targaryen sigil is black because later on in the history of Westeros, there's the Blackfire Rebellion, where a bastard line of Targaryens tries to take the throne, and that's part of the context for the Night of the Seven Kingdoms show and Dunk and Egg. So yeah, you're right. Like, the fact that this historical tapestry is leading up to the Black Dragon, you can see that as a hint of the future Blackfire plot lines. I think that's probably not what was intended, because the Blackfires are just not relevant for this particular show. But it is a connection you can draw. I do think, speaking of Blackfire, I think that it's neat that Aemond is wielding Blackfire at Harrenhal this episode. And I think this is the first time that we've ever seen Blackfire wielded in combat. Blackfire was the sword of Aegon I Targaryen, who conquered Westeros. It's a Valyrian steel blade. And we've seen Viserys hold the sword in Season 1, but Aemond, I think, is the first to actually use it in combat, so that's pretty cool. In the main Game of Thrones books, Blackfire is currently missing. No one knows where it is. There are theories that maybe Illyrio has it and will give it to young Griff, which might be a low-key hint that he is a Blackfire, because the Blackfires are named after the Blackfire sword, because Aegon the Unworthy knighted Daemon Blackfire with Blackfire, and he took the sword's name as his own name. It's a whole thing. We've got a video about the Blackfire rebellions if you're curious about all of that. Thank you for the donation from Anonymous, who says, Rhaenyra and Daemon walking through the Red Keep was tough. Thank you, Nick, who says, what a great Season 2 finale. Truly excellent. Yeah, well, it would have hit harder if we got it 2 years ago, I reckon, but agreed. Thank you, Baines, who says that Rhaenyra has a future in baseball. What, with the way that she swung that sword? I'm a little puzzled with the beheading scene, because Rhaenyra was wielding Dark Sister, which is another Valyrian steel blade. And Valyrian steel blades are meant to be super sharp. I mean, in the Game of Thrones show, we saw Brienne wielding Oathkeeper, a Valyrian sword, and Oathkeeper shattered another sword, if I remember rightly, which made it seem like, whoa, like Valyrian steel is like super special, like it can cut through anything. I mean, Valyrian steel can kill White Walkers in the Game of Thrones show. So when Rhaenyra swings the sword and like cuts into Otto's back, I was thinking, like maybe the sword should just go through him because it's super sharp, but maybe not. Maybe Rhaenyra was swinging it wrong. I don't know, but I feel like they're kind of inconsistent about whether Valyrian steel is super sharp or not. Whatever. Thank you, Peter, who says, call me basic, but that shot of Rhaenyra ascending in the blood reflection was rad as hell. So was the post-fish feed hoedown. Yeah, seeing Rhaenyra walk up to the throne reflected in the puddle of blood. I mean, like so much of the symbolism this episode, it's all about how her ascension happens in the context and in the aftermath of so much loss and tragedy and travesty and disaster. This is not how she hoped to become queen. Rhaenyra was trying really hard to avoid this. Rhaenyra, to her credit, tried really hard to take the throne without violence and without slaughtering people. And, you know, I mean, she has succeeded in taking King's Landing with not many deaths. So, look, she tried. Thank you, Luna, who says Orwell for episode MVP. Yeah, well, yeah, he managed to save Alicent and keep his head without being killed by Team Black. So I guess we can call that a win for Orwell. Thank you, C. Katrin, who says Emma, the Rhaenyra actor, said Emma had me crying alongside them. Feel maybe more was OG planned with show version of Otto. Plus maybe I'm too woke, but did we need another Alicent sexual assault scene? Yeah, I mean, I suppose you can make the argument that we have had a lot of sexual assault scenes in the show, especially for Alicent. So, like, does it add something to have the Jasper scene as well? Or is that just the show repeating itself? I feel like, yeah, I mean, you know, it's personal opinion, I suppose. I feel like it's part of the war story that they're telling. I think that this episode was about making us uncomfortable with how much fun we had with the gullet battle last episode. Like, you know, the gullet was cool and fun last episode, and I think this episode is about the aftermath and facing us with how ugly the war and the violence is. And in the same vein that it confronts us with the ugliness of the death and the loss, I think that the sexual assault is part of that. It's another facet to the horror. I mean, it's like Rhaenyra's mourning. Rhaenyra's grieving is hard to watch this episode. It confronts us with the horror and the pain of the war. And I suppose you could see the assault of Alicent as another ugly, evil part of that. But whether it's excessive or gratuitous, I suppose, is a matter of personal opinion. Thank you, Humboldt, who says Jace should have had one kiss with his betrothed before he died. Yeah, I agree with that. So, like Jace and Baelor, they were betrothed to marry. They were the future king and queen of Westeros. And we did get some scenes with them where they were talking about their dads, and they seemed to get along. And it seemed nice that these two liked each other. Like, in a show full of ugly, dysfunctional relationships, it was nice to see some people who liked each other. But there didn't seem to be a whole lot of passion there, and we never saw any physical intimacy there. And I agree, like, I think that Jace's death might have hit harder if they showed some love or romance or sexuality or intimacy between those two. Yeah, it seems like a missed opportunity. Thank you, Don't Eat Glass. Excellent advice. Who says, hey Shift, now that we've finished Season 2, I have this irrational fear that the next 4 episodes are going to be a bit slow. Do you think that Season 3 will end up in a weird place like Season 2? Loved the last ep on Nebula and Ulf's weird poop. Yeah, I believe that Alt Shrift X and Glidus had an extended dialogue about Ulf's weird poop in the previous episode, and if you want to experience that in all its glory, sign up to Nebula and watch Dragon Time. Yeah, well, it's funny, isn't it? Because if these first episodes are really the ending of Season 2, then that means that there's only 6 episodes in Season 3, right? Like, if we really just ended Season 2, we've got to fit the entirety of Season 3 into just 6 episodes. And that's got to be a quick 6 episodes, doesn't it? So, I mean, I wonder if the next 6 episodes are going to feel rushed. They're going to have to be rushed. Because in theory, we've only got 14 episodes to finish this whole show. And there's a lot more stuff that happens in the books. And so I feel like the pace is going to have to be quite fast. I mean, they're certainly going to have a lot of stuff happen off screen. there are battles and battles and battles that will have to happen off screen, I suppose, like the Riverlands battles at the Red Fork and the Fish Feed. So I feel like they should be fast-paced. They're either going to be fast-paced or they're going to have to cut a lot of stuff out. I think that's kind of the two options. And I suppose it's also possible that, yeah, maybe there's going to be a weird structure. Like, maybe Season 3 won't have quite a good climax. Maybe it'll be moved to Season 4. But we'll just have to wait and see. Los Belito says, good episode, but maybe a bit rushed. I suppose we could have sat a little bit longer with some of the grief and loss. But, I mean, Season 2 was so slow that I think that an explosive, fast-paced movement was a good idea. May have been better last season. Thank you, Michael, who says, I called it on every video that I watched. The gullet wasn't really over, and the seeds were going to be at what happened after the credits. Vindication. Happy for you, Michael. We will... Thank you, Zebra, who says, Season 2 finale was great. Can't wait for Season 3. Well, yeah, I suppose that's one way to look at it. If this was the Season 2 finale, then the wait for Season 3 is the shortest ever. We've only got to wait 7 days for the beginning of Season 3, so I guess that's the glass half full perspective. Thank you, Fack, who says, with how many people complained about Vermax's death breaking book lore, despite being an almost one-to-one adaptation of the book, it's clear that many will never be satisfied, no matter what the show does. Yeah, I mean, some people are always going to be critical, and I think that internet algorithms bring the angriest, most outraged voices to the tops of our social media feeds. Thank you, Meebit, who says, can't wait for Season 3 finale during Season 4, Episode 4. Yeah. That's the fear. That's the fear. Like the structure and the pacing might still be out of whack because they've only got 6 episodes to do Season 3, so they might have to pick up the pace. Thank you, Juby, who says, this was an incredible episode. I can't stop imagining this as the season finale for Season 2 and how impactful this would have been. I mean, think, like, if we saw this 2 years ago, if for the last 2 years we had just seen this episode, instead of having seen the sort of weird off-kilter Season 2 Episode 8, I agree. The whole fandom would be in a better place if this was the episode that we'd had on our minds for the last 2 years. And I agree, especially Emma Darcy's performance. Like, there was so much strength, and it's such a powerful performance with her grief at the start of the episode and her sort of ugly, complex rise to power at the end of the episode. What a great bookend for the episode and for Season 2. It could have been, but alas. Thank you, Big Bopper, who says, could you beat that degenerate Alt-Schwift X in a fight? Alt-Schwift X uses a idiosyncratic variation of the Drunken Master style of Kung Fu, whereas I have a more conventional sort of approach. So, look, Alt-Schwift is unpredictable, but I think that I should be able to take him on with my superior techniques. But, you know, we'll have to wait and see. Thank you, The Chosen One, who says, do you think Rhaenyra looked weak at the end, with her wavering on Otto's punishment, hacking at him basically rolling his eyes and undermining her? It doesn't instill confidence in court. Yeah, I completely agree. Like, that whole last scene was a bad look for Rhaenyra. So I think that we can expect Rhaenyra to struggle to, like, project power and authority moving forwards, because that's what her whole storyline is about, I think. I mean, I'm thinking of, like, how Rhaenyra behaved in Season 1. Like Rhaenyra was never good at, like, optics. Like, I remember Rhaenyra yelling at King Viserys, saying, I don't want to marry someone, I don't want to be a princess, blah, blah, blah. Like Rhaenyra has never really been interested in doing the performance of politics, and that's why she needs Alicent, right? Because Alicent, for years, was being queen. She was, like, ruling on behalf of Viserys with Otto. Alicent knows how to do political theatre. Otto knows how to do political theatre. The great irony is that Otto and Alicent would be the best possible allies to help Rhaenyra rule. If they were all on the same team, they could be a great team. but she just cut off Otto's head, and Alicent saw her kill her father. So the tragedy is that they could have worked so well together. Thank you, Chief Smeeth, who says, crazy episode. I wish HBO hadn't cut the budget for Season 2. This would have been a much more satisfying ending for Season 2 and probably would have made online discussion more bearable. Yeah, I think it was a massive L for the studio or the CEO or whoever the fuck decided to change Season 2 to just 8 episodes. I think it clearly made the story worse. Thank you, Cobra, who says that Dunk does clout Egg in the book. I may have said at one point that Dunk never actually hits Egg; he just threatens to. I'm sure you're right that there are some instances where Dunk does hit Egg, but most of the time he doesn't, and mostly he just threatens it. And I'm sure that Dunk never hits Egg very hard, because if Dunk hit Egg as hard as he could, Egg would be an omelette. Thank you, Nuke Fandango, who argues... let's talk about Nettles. So, I guess this is mildly spoilery. It's not really. I don't think it's really a spoiler. Mild spoiler about Nettles. So, Nettles in the books is the character who claims Sheep Stealer. And Nettles is different to Rhaena, because Nettles is not a Targaryen. Nettles is a commoner. And... no one knows who Nettles' parents are. And one of the books calls her a dragon seed. Another book doesn't call her a dragon seed. No one really knows whether Nettles has Targaryen blood or not. But I think one of the things that's interesting about Nettles is the idea that, well, if she's not a Targaryen, if she doesn't have Targaryen blood, if she's not a dragon seed, maybe she is just some random person who claimed a dragon with patience and bravery. And if that's the case, that's interesting, because it contradicts the whole idea that Targaryens are superior, and that you need the magic dragon blood to ride dragons. And I think that probably is George Martin's intention in the end. Because there's something fucked up about the message that some people are genetically superior to others, and only Targaryens have the magic power to ride dragons, and they're the best, and that's why they deserve to be king. I don't think that's the message that George Martin is trying to tell. I think that George Martin is questioning those ideas, and he's telling a story where it's possible for people to be heroic, not by their blood, but by their choices, and by their courage, and by their virtues. And I think that Jon Snow is a character that will explore this in the books, because I think in the books Jon will discover that he's a Targaryen, and people will say, Jon, you're a Targaryen, that means you're special, that means you should be king. And Jon's going to go like, well, no, like I'm not a hero because of my blood. Jon Snow is a hero because of his choices. And so I think that's ultimately the message that they're going to say. But in the show, they don't have Nettles. They don't have this non-Targaryen dragon rider. I mean, they kind of do with, like, Ulf. I think that's kind of what they were hinting at last episode with Ulf, where Ulf was like, yeah, like, I didn't know my parents, but this, like, priest said that I had Targaryen blood, so I guess I'm a Targaryen. Like, is that true? I think that Ulf could be a non-Targaryen dragon rider in the show, like, and they could also do that with Adam, because we don't know who Adam's mother is, and we don't know whether Adam's mother has dragon blood, and Corlys doesn't have Targaryen dragon blood. So I think that there are other characters than Nettles who they could do this with, and I hope that they do this with. I hope that they reveal that, you know, that Ulf or Adam don't have Targaryen blood, and so they explore that idea that anyone can ride a dragon. I hope that they do that. But I think what Nuke Fandango is arguing is that, because Nettles isn't in the story, maybe that means that the Targaryen blood supremacists are right, and you have to have the magic blood to do the dragon riding. So yeah, I think the show, we've got to let them cook and see where they land. I hope that they do reveal someone as being a non-Targaryen dragon rider. I suppose another angle on all of this is, like, instead of saying that, oh, anyone can ride a dragon, anyone can have the power, maybe what they will ultimately say is that, yeah, only Targaryens can ride dragons, and they really shouldn't. like maybe what they will land on is, yeah, dragon riding's a bad idea. Dragons are terrible. And I think something that they might reveal is that there's theories about Azor Ahai and the first Dragon Riders, and that like there's this image at the start of the opening sequence. This image here. Like what is this image of? This is a dragon with fiery wings with the platinum blonde head of a human being and a woman with a knife. It looks like some kind of dark, fucked up sacrificial ritual is happening. And I think the interpretation that makes sense here is that this is how the Targaryens became dragon riders. They did it through messed up blood magic ritual human sacrifice. I think that one of the revelations in the books will be, hey, the Targaryens or the Valyrians did evil things to become dragon riders. The whole Targaryen dynasty, the whole Valyrian dynasty was built on evil, human sacrifice, mass slavery. It's not a good thing. And I think that ultimately that's why the Targaryens and the dragons will die off. And so I think this whole notion of like riding fire-breathing lizards being the correct way to govern a country, I think the story is going to land on, maybe not. Maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe we should let this weird tree guy rule instead, you know? Like, let's try something different. Democracy. Who knows? Electoral college. Give it a whirl. I think we're going to end this dragon lizard slavery business. So look, I think there's a lot of different ways the story can go. And they're not doing the Nettles story. I hope that they explore some of those ideas through different characters. Although again, they've only got like 14 episodes to do it, so we're gonna have to hope that they pick up the pace. Thank you, Teching, who says, R.I.P. Simon Strong seemed like a chill guy. I think House Lothston is up next to inherit the death warrant that is Harrenhal. Yeah, I don't remember the exact succession over the top of my head, but House Lothston is fun because they have the sigil of a bat as their house arms, and in this episode we saw the bats fleeing Harrenhal before Vhagar arrived. So there's all these legends about the vampire bats of Harrenhal, and Mad Donnell Lothston would turn into a bat and steal children to drink their blood. There's lots of fun, goofy, haunted house mythology about Harrenhal. It must be all the ghosts. Must be Alice Rivers. Thank you, Mason, who says, did you see the close-up behind-the-scenes photos of the Green Men? Wonder why they would put that much detail not to show them again. Do I ever? Let's pull up that image. There's a close-up image of a green man. There's a close-up image of a green man. And there's a close-up image of a green man from Clinton Liberty's social media. Yeah, it is cool how they put so much detail into the appearance of these green men, who only appear in the background very briefly. I don't know, but I imagine that part of how this works is that, you know, when they're doing the costumes and the makeup, they don't know how close to the camera they're going to be. They don't know what shots are ultimately going to be used. So I imagine they just put lots of detail just in case. Maybe that's their reasoning. But yeah, I mean, they look really cool. And the Green Men, you know, are very, very mysterious. We don't know what the Green Men are. We just know that they were an order of guardians who protect the mysterious Isle of Faces, sacred to the old gods. They were formed thousands of years ago in the Pact, when the humans made an alliance with the Children of the Forest. I think that it's a good theory that that the Green Men might be like part human, part child of the forest, because George Martin loves writing about interspecies hybrids. Don't blame me, blame George. Or maybe the Green Men are just ancient green seers like Bloodraven, or maybe they're like White Walkers. There's the whole idea that White Walkers are kind of offshoots of the old gods. I don't know. All I know is that they sure have magnificent eyebrows. Thank you, Ariella, who says, a lot of people are talking about the Alicent sexual assault scene, but I think it's pretty realistic. I won't tell anyone about If You Do For Me. It's unfortunately not uncommon. It broke my heart, but I think it's consistent with the show's themes. Yeah, there was an element of blackmail to it, wasn't it? Because Jasper was saying, I know that you are betraying the Greens, and I know that you had sex with Kristen Cole, so have sex with me or else I will tell everyone. So yeah, there's a blackmail element to it. Thank you, Jackhammer, who says, Hi, Aaliyah Shai-Hulud X. Yeah, man. Who says, sorry if this is a bit off topic, but I just finished reading the first 6 Dune books and wanted to hear more of your thoughts on Heretics and Chapter House. Favorite characters, plots, scenes, themes? Yeah, we won't talk too much about Dune right now, but after House of the Dragon and the Mad King play, we will be working on some Dune videos. There's a bunch of Dune videos that we've been working on that we've had in progress for a while, and I want to get them out before the 3rd Dune movie comes out in December. So yeah, we've got Dune stuff coming. Yeah, Heretics and Chapter House are the 5th and 6th Dune books, and they are notorious for being weird and horny. They were written a bit more quickly. They were a bit more rushed than some of the other books. Frank Herbert needed money at the time. There's a whole sort of sad, complex backstory to those books. If you're interested, we made a video about the author, Frank Herbert, that I think is a really good video. If you look on our channel, Alt-Shift-X, there's a video about Frank Herbert. I think that Heretics and Chapter House are not as good books as the first 4 books. I think the first 4 books are better than Book 5 and Book 6. I do kind of enjoy some of the playfulness and some of the ideas and some of the unabashed horniness of those books. I think that dominatrices from space are a perfectly wonderful villain. Frank is having fun, but it's also very much an unfinished storyline. There's a lot of ideas that don't really go anywhere, and I think that it's not always consistent with the prior books. So, it's not Frank's best work. And if someone wants to just read the first 4 books and stop there, I think that's a pretty reasonable choice. But yeah, there is fun to be had in those books as well. Thank you, Matt, who says the episode was a step up from season 2. Finally, things are happening. My biggest gripe is the scene with Alicent and Jasper. Happy we're giving Alicent agency, but is more unwritten and unnecessary assault needed? What do you say, Lord Shift? Yeah, I mean, this entire show is unnecessary assault and violence, right? The whole show is about horrific, awful war and violence of many different kinds. And I think that's something that George often says, is that sexual assault are it's part of war. And George argues that you're being dishonest if you don't depict all of the different kinds of evil violence in war. And George's goal is not to glorify war, but to show the ugliness and the evil as well. And so I think that that's the intent that they put that Alicent Jasper scene in there. Thank you, Sir Poops, who says, what did you think of the cinematography this season? The fight scenes in the first episode were a little jarring for me. Yeah, well, I think there are some gorgeous shots this episode. I mean, the shot of the firelight reflecting on Rhaenyra's face, the shots of the dragon flame looking up from the water. Like, the shots at the very beginning of this episode are pretty stunning. Sir Poops wants another episode of A Cock-Abridged. Yeah, so there is a long-running series of podcasts by my evil half-grunkle Alt-Swift-X called Game of Thrones Abridged. There's over 100 episodes of Game of Thrones Abridged, and in some of them he's sober. And it's quite a silly series, and maybe it will continue. I think that George R. Martin and Alt-Swift-X are in the world's slowest race to finish The Winds of Winter and Game of Thrones Abridged, respectively. But I can certainly tell you that right now, Alt-Shift-X is busy recording Dragon Time. And you can go and listen to Dragon Time Season 3, Episode 2 right now on Nebula. It's a good way to support the channel. There's over 80 hours of exclusive content on there. There's an Alt-Shift-X chat about Attack on Titan on Nebula. There's a Glidus and Shift talk about Ivanhoe, which is the movie that inspired Dunk and Egg. There's a 22-hour-long video about Jon Snow on Nebula. 50% off an annual subscription at the link below. I do appreciate it if you sign up to Nebula. Thank you, Plural, who says, nice episode. Shift. Episode 1 and 2 are what we suppose to have had for the finale of Season 2. Condell must have had this written years ago. Guess the next 6 episodes are what is actually Season 3. Yeah, as we've said, I think that is the case. And I think that, trying to fit Season 3 into 6 episodes is challenging. I wonder if there's any hope that Season 4 might be 10 episodes. I don't think the episode count of Season 4 has been officially confirmed. It would be cool if they extended it to 10 episodes. I don't imagine that they will. And I suppose it would be I suppose it would be extra weird if Season 4 was 10 episodes, if Season 3 is effectively just 3 episodes. What a mess. Thank you, Dad Fluid, who says, great stuff. Will you retroactively do the weekly explained? So yeah, this season we are not making the weekly scripted explained videos that we did for every other season in the last 10 years. 10 years! I don't think we will make individual explained episodes, explained videos for each episode of Season 3. I think it might be possible that we might make a House of the Dragon Season 3 explained video, like wrapping up the whole season in one video. That might make sense. I mean, it depends on what this season is like, right? Like, if I feel like the season is super interesting and, like, needs an explained video, then maybe we'll make that video. And if the season is not super interesting or not super complex, then maybe it doesn't need that video. I don't know. We'll see how we go. I mean, another thing on the plan is to make a video about the Mad King play that's happening in July. I expect we'll make an Alt Shift X video about that if it's interesting, if it's revelatory. So yeah, look, it depends. I've got to see the show before I decide whether it's worth a video, I suppose. But like I say, there's also a lot of June stuff to finish this year. I mean, the real June part 2 is a very big video, and it's going to take a whole bunch of time and work to finish it. And it'll be a bit of a race to finish it before June part 3. And there's also like a lot of other videos on the back burner, including some monkey business that I'm eager to conclude. So yeah, there's a lot on the docket. We'll do as much as we can. Thank you, Kitty97Cat, who says, I really love the deeper drums that have been added to the opening theme this season. It feels like war drums. Yeah, I agree. It's a subtle change from the opening theme from last season. And I love the bleakness of the smoke and embers at the end of the title card, in contrast to the throne in Season 2's opening sequence. It's like Rhaenyra says, like, what the fuck is this all about? Are we really doing this for a pointy chair? Did my sons die for a pointy chair? Guys, what are we doing? That's the vibe here. Thank you, Arza, who says, Rhaenyra finally allowed to do something, but the writers still limit her capability to execute her agency. Yeah, so, I mean, this story, the show has focused the story on Rhaenyra and Alicent. And Rhaenyra and Alicent's stories are largely about how they are struggling to act and how they are limited. And I think that they're exploring some very real themes about, like, gender and politics and, like, also morality. Like, Rhaenyra, in a lot of ways, has chosen to limit her actions and chosen to limit her dragons because she doesn't want to kill innocent people. So I think that, like, there's a lot of interesting meat on the bone to talk about here thematically. Like, there's a lot that is real and interesting about a ruler who is trying to do a war in a restrained, ethical way. But is it fun to watch? Is it fun to watch a character whose agency is limited? Is it fun to watch a show in which both of the main characters can't do stuff and who get held back at every turn, who face obstacle after obstacle and sometimes can't quite do the thing? I think that it's, you know, it's a balance of, like, trying to entertain and trying to tell a grounded, thoughtful story. I think that they are succeeding in telling a grounded, thoughtful story. I think they're succeeding in having great performances from their actors. I think they're succeeding in delivering spectacle visually. Are they succeeding in giving us fun, satisfying, cathartic character arcs? maybe not as much. I mean, this story is always a tragedy. Like there's something about this story. It should not be fun, especially at this point in the story. The Dance of the Dragons is always an embarrassing, tragic clusterfuck that does no one any good. None of this should be fun. It should all be sad times, and that's another way that makes it a difficult show to make it like fun and entertaining. I mean, like there are different ways they could have done this, of course. Like there's a lot of different tones that they could have gone for the adaptation. Like they've chosen quite a serious, thoughtful tone. Another tone they could have gone for is like ugly, messy reality show. Like the tone of like Love Island. I haven't seen Love Island. The tone of like Real Housewives. I just want to like they could have made this show about Rhaenyra and Alicent just screaming at each other, stabbing each other's children. You slept with who? Like they really could have gone like full like just like embarrassing like TMZ, like just mudsling ugly, just they could have gone more in that direction. And that could have been a kind of fun in itself. They could have gone lurid. They could have leaned in on like fun sex scandals as opposed to upsetting assaults. Like they chose a more realistic, serious tone. They could have gone a more scandalous tone. I mean, one of the characters in the books is Mushroom. And Mushroom is a randy dwarf who claims to have a penis longer than his arm, and he makes up all these ribald stories about, ooh, Daemon had sex with Alicent, Mushroom claims, and Rhaenyra had sex with Laena, Mushroom claims. Like, they could have told the Mushroom version of this story, and it may have been more fun, it may have been more lurid, but they went for something that's more thoughtful and thematic. So, it's... your mileage may vary on what you prefer, but I think that what you cannot deny is that House of the Dragon is ambitious. House of the Dragon, they did not go the easy option. They are trying to do something that grapples with big themes. They're trying to do something with a bit of weight to it, and I'm all for ambitious storytelling. I'm glad that they're being ambitious, and also let's not forget that this show is like funny as hell a lot of the time. Daemon is very funny. Tom Glencarny is very funny. Like there's a lot of great like comedic work. Like Ulf, Tom Bennett, there's a lot of great comedic work in this show as well. So I think that like they're threading a needle here, and I think that they succeed more often than they fail. Thank you, Uncle Fluid, who asks parasocial questions. Look, it is true that Glidus exclusively dresses as Crown Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. That is accurate. Thank you, Katie, who says, shout out to Dragon Time on Nebula. I love the nuanced way that you and Glidus talk about the show. It fills me with joy to listen while I work. I've been watching you for years and feel like I owe you some more money. Cheers. Thank you very much, Katie. I appreciate it. Yeah, well, I think the tone of Alt Shift X as well as Alt Shift X is that we try to like meet the show on its own terms, and we try to do something with a bit of thought and a bit of joy rather than just pure poison and shouting. I'm not interested in just shouting hatred, so I think the internet's got enough of that. And I think that there is a lot of joyous silliness on Dragon Time on Nebula, so thanks for enjoying it. Plural Board says, Aemond may learn about the prophecy from Alicent, or from Alice, perhaps. Yeah, well, I think that's a good point, because Aemond is one of those, like, Targaryens. Like, Aemond is like, yeah, we're the Dragon Lords, we should be in charge. Yeah, I'm a cool guy, I deserve to rule the world because I have a cool lizard. Like, yeah, Aemond is that. And so Aemond does seem like the kind of guy who would be super on board a prophecy that the Targaryens might have to save the world from the White Walkers. And it's very sad and ironic that Viserys never told Aemond about the prophecy. And Viserys never talked to Helaena about prophecy. Helaena sees the future. Helaena has crazy visions. Viserys talked about, oh, it's so rare for a Targaryen to be a dreamer, and Viserys never realized that his own daughter Helena is a prophet and a vision who sees the future, a seer who sees the future. So it's so tragic and stupid that Viserys and Helena never talked about that stuff. And, Helena has talked with Aemond about visions and stuff, and Aemond was mostly terrified. But I think that, yeah, you're right. Aemond would love to hear about the prophecy. And I think that it would be kind of tragic and ridiculous if Aemond heard about the prophecy and if Aemond had the visions and Aemond was like, oh yeah, shit, we should not be fighting this war. We should be uniting. We should be working together. We've got to end this war and protect the Targaryen regime to save the world. Like, Aemond might be on board for that. I mean, Aemond's, heel turn started when his dragon accidentally killed Luke, right? Like, there's a world in which Aemond was not a villain. I mean, if Luke hadn't slashed out Aemond's eye, Aemond might not have become a murderous monster. So, it's tragedy upon tragedy here. But, yeah, I think it is a possibility that Aemond might have visions and learn of prophecies through Alice. And, how might that change him? Is it too late for Aemond to try and do something useful, or is he doomed to be a murderer forever? Thank you for the donation from Rictator, who says, Nightmare blunt rotation in the cart, surrounded by crows for hours and hours. What is your Game of Thrones dream blunt rotation? I'm going full conspiracy theorist. I want to be with Marwyn and Quaithe and Melora the Mad Maid. I just want to sit with the most batshit dream befuddled people in the realm, and I want to hear all about their psychedelic visions of the future and who they think is really pulling the strings. And I think I'm gonna get the real goss from Melora and Marwyn and Quaithe. That's my choice. Thank you, Aza, who says, if only Sheepstealer ate the goat at God's Eye. Wouldn't it be funny if Alice Rivers got eaten by a dragon in the form of a goat? That would be unfortunate. Well, I mean, as far as we know, maybe Sheepstealer only likes to eat sheep, and Daemon said that Caraxes only likes to eat pigs. Who's the goat eater? Which dragon likes to eat goat? Thank you, Caesar, who says, poor Simon Strong, R.I.P. Simon Strong is one of the few, decent fellas in the show, as far as we know. Simon never did anything wrong to anyone. All he ever wanted to do was enjoy some hearty meals and to admire some virile young men. What did Simon Strong ever do wrong? Very unfortunate, very sad to see him go. Simon Strong was, quite accommodating to Daemon, even though Daemon repeatedly threatened to murder Simon. Simon was, almost a father figure to Daemon, and so it's so unfortunate that Aemond, who is the less mature of the two, murdered Simon. What a shame. I think that's, if Aemond didn't kill Simon, I think Simon could have been a very good influence on Aemond, But, alas. Thank you, Burrito to Sodas, who says these episodes felt like the end of Season 2, penultimate battle, then closure with Rhaenyra, so Season 3 will be a 6-episode season. Yeah, we have discussed this a bit. I am worried that Season 3 might have to be a bit fast-paced to get through Season 3. Thank you, Nuke Fandango, who says that the Prophecy of Ice and Fire angle is idiotic. Yeah, so the books don't mention Viserys or Rhaenyra believing in a prophecy, and the books don't mention Aegon the Conqueror having a prophecy. I think that it is consistent with the books, with the novels where we actually get to know the Targaryens. Almost, many Targaryens believe in prophecy, and many Targaryens have these, prophetic visions, including, Egg and Daeron and Aerys the First and Rhaegar and Aemon, and, they were all into this prophecy stuff. So, I think it is pretty reasonable to think that Viserys and Rhaenyra and Helena might also have visions and prophecies. I think that the bit that personally I don't like is that they made it about the White Walkers specifically. I think really what bothers me is just that shot of the White Walkers in Season 2, Episode 8. It just doesn't look very good, and I don't want to be reminded of Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 3, because it sucked. And Arya kills the White Walkers, so like, what has that got to do with the Targaryens? I like the idea that the Targaryens are like narcissistic egomaniacs who all think that they are the chosen one and must win. I also like the idea of like, what if the prophecy is like a propaganda tool? Like, what if Aegon was like exaggerating the prophecy or like using the prophecy for his political advantage? I think there's all like interesting questions there. And of course, like in real history, many leaders have had religious or mystical justifications for their tyranny. So like, I think that there are good ideas to use there. But if we're yammering about the Night King every few episodes, I think that's not ideal. Your mileage may vary. Thank you, Patty, who says CH rocks. Thank you, 93 Shingy, who says Aemond sent Larys to find Otto, and he did. Did Aemond send Larys to find Otto? I don't recall. Yeah, there might have been a line where he said that. But, I think when Aemond sent Larys to find Otto, the implication was, restore him to the... Oh, well, yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Aemond did tell Larys to bring Otto back so that he could be hand to the king. Aemond did not say, lock Otto in the deepest, darkest dungeon where no one will find him and then give him to Team Black. Aemond said, make him hand to the king. So, yeah, Otto was... maybe that's what you call malicious compliance. I don't think... Larys was not exactly following those orders in good faith. Thank you, Josh, who says, it seems like the writers wanted to remind the fans who he was before killing him, while also painting him as the bad person he is in show, so fans have something to cheer about after the complicated emotions of killing Otto. I would have liked it if we spent a little more time with Otto. I would have liked it if we explored Otto's culpability in this war. I would have liked if we got to explore the relationship between Otto and Alicent and Otto and Rhaenyra. I mean, for better or worse, like, Otto was in Rhaenyra's life for a really long time. Almost like a father figure, or like a evil step-uncle or something. And, like, Otto and Viserys' relationship was so interesting. And, and Otto's relationship with his grandchildren, with Aegon and Aemond. Like, I think that it would have been good to confront Otto about his failure to teach Aegon and Aemond and Helena. Like Otto should have done better, and I would have liked to have had more discussion of that. Maybe we'll get some of that between Rhaenyra and Alicent in the future. But yeah, I do feel like they could have done more with Rhys Ifans. Thank you, B4. Thank you, Jenny of Coldstone Creamery, who says, any reason why Alicent would not send a raven to Dragonstone to tell Rhaenyra that Aegon fled? She had time to DM Ormond. Yeah, well, yeah, because I think that there's a possibility the next episode Rhaenyra is going to be like, where's Aegon? You let Aegon escape. And Alicent is going to say, it's a misunderstanding. I didn't know that Aegon escaped. I don't know where he is. Like, I don't know if that's the plotline that I want to see. I mean, yeah, Alicent could have messaged Rhaenyra, but would that have changed anything? I don't know if that would have changed anything. I don't know if that makes Alicent look any more or less guilty in Rhaenyra's eyes. I mean, yeah, the whole message to Ormond was strange. I don't know what it achieved to send a message to Ormond to delay Ormond for like 3 days when he, he's probably like weeks away from King's Landing. I don't know what the point of that was. I think it was just kind of a contrived way to connect the scene to Ormond and to introduce Ormond, which is quite an odd introduction, wasn't it? So, Thank you, B4, who says, when Otto died, my buddy, without missing a beat, said, in bowling, they call that cleaning up with a spare. Yes, they sort of knocked down the pin who was there, him and Jasper. Thank you. You know those like goofy 3D animations they have at bowling lanes where they like play the, they have all these different goofy characters with the pins. That's what I'm imagining now, like a pin with Otto's face going, whoa, and his head falling off. Thank you, MS, who says, I think the issues with Rhaenyra and Alicent's plotlines are due to Ryan Condal following in the first season the gardening style of George Martin, basing the whole plot development on their character and motivations, which is now incompatible with the history from Fire and Blood. Yeah, I mean, George Martin famously calls himself a gardener, which means that he doesn't plan every plot detail in advance. He more just sort of sets up the basic important plot lines, but then he just follows where his characters go. And he comes up with new ideas along the way, and sometimes his characters surprise him, and he comes up with new ideas, and he changes his plans. And I think that that might be part of why the book series is unfinished, because George keeps changing his mind and rewriting whole character arcs, and the story keeps getting bigger and more expansive with more characters, and I think that that's part of why the series isn't done. I mean, I don't know how much Ryan Condal planned out the whole series. I mean, I would say that around season 1 and even early season 2, George R. R. Martin, the author, was very positive about House of the Dragon. And then suddenly, during the airing of House of the Dragon season 2, 2 years ago, George Martin suddenly said, "Oh, I don't approve of the future plans for House of the Dragon. I don't approve of Ryan's plans for season 3. So there was like a breakdown and a disagreement. And like, I guess that means that George can't have known the season 3 plans when he was involved in season 1 and even when he was approving of season 2. Like, so there must have been a point where the plans changed, right? If everything was planned out from the start, if they were planning from the beginning to, you know, cut nettles and have Rhaena claim Sheep Stealer, George Martin can't have known that in 2022 and in the early 2024. So I guess that means either George didn't know Ryan's full plans, or yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe Ryan hadn't decided what was going to happen with Rhaena and Nettles from the beginning. So yeah, I don't know how much it was planned ahead. But I do agree that you get the sense that they are following the characters and the motivations, and they're going for like emotional resonance and thematic resonance, and sometimes they're sacrificing plot. I think sometimes, especially with like Alicent, there are aspects where the plot feels contrived, but they do that to try and create an interesting emotional tension and thematic tension. So yeah, it's tricky, and they are certainly diverging further from the books, and George Martin does seem to be pissed off about that. Thank you for the donation from Kermit the Frog, who says, "Maybe Helena's comment about seasons is a funny nod to this episode being season 2 material." That's a fun idea. What exactly does she say? She says that it's strange it isn't the season. Oh god, you might be right. That would be really funny. Where's the scene? It's here, isn't it? "This is strange. It isn't the season." You might be right. That's very funny. So maybe when Helena is talking about strange seasons here, she's talking about how this episode in season 3 is actually meant to be season 2. That's really funny, if that's what they're doing. That's like a meta comment. Like Helena is like breaking the fourth wall and saying, "Huh, we're in season 3? I thought we were at the end of season 2. What's going on? What happened to the seasons? HBO, Warner Brothers, Discovery, Peacock, Paramount? What's going on?" That's fun. I mean, Helena did like break the fourth wall last season when she was in a black void and she said, "It's just a story. We're just characters on HBO Max." Like, she kind of said that last season. Yeah, that's very funny, Kermit. And Kermit points out that the Blackfire dragon also refers to a Targaryen civil war, like this current Targaryen civil war. So yeah, maybe it does allude to the Blackfire rebellion. Kermit says, "I love all the Nebula videos." Well, if you want to go and check out a whole bunch of exclusive Nebula videos, sign up to Nebula. The link below. Over 80 hours of exclusive Shift and Swift and Glidus content, and you can listen to it on podcast feeds as well, ad-free on podcast apps using the Nebula podcast feeds. Links in the description. Thank you, Skilled, who says, "Didn't Glidus suggest that Otto was in the Red Keep all along as a joke?" Look, Glidus has made a bunch of pretty good predictions lately, actually. Glidus has had some pretty hot takes in Dragon Time lately. So yeah, definitely check him out. Thank you, Strong Belwas, who says that, yeah, Helena's comment about seasons is a reference to season 2 and season 3. Yeah, maybe it is. Strong Belwas says, "Who is your favorite dragon?" I mean, I think Caraxes is so fun and unique and fucked up and squeaky and goofy and scary. He's such a ragamuffin, just like Daemon. So I like Caraxes. Thank you, Nuke, who says, "What if Aemond awkwardly kissed Lord Strong?" Yeah, well, look, I feel like Aemond should have some daddy issues just as much as he has some mummy issues. I mean, like, Viserys was not there for Aemond. That's the thing. That's why it's so sad that he killed Simon Strong. Simon Strong could have been such a good surrogate dad for Aemond. Thank you, Shadow Humor, who says, my wish is to see Balerion in his prime before I die. Balerion the Black Dread was the dragon of Aegon I, the Conqueror, and also the dragon of Viserys before this show. Yeah, well, there is talk of a Aegon the Conqueror movie or TV show. There has been screen adaptations of that story in development at various times, so that might happen. Thank you, Can, who says, I'm enjoying Season 3 so far. I was wondering if you have seen the reactions from all the fans and the fan subreddits. It's extremely over the top. I think that social media algorithms distort reality. There is a lot of hyperbolic nonsense happening on the internet, for sure. Thank you, Vala Martinez, who says, in studies conducted in the early 2000s, ecologists discovered that climate change was causing oak trees to leaf out earlier. Consequently, the peak caterpillar season was arriving up to 2 weeks earlier than it did in the 1980s, maybe hinting at White Walker movement. Vala Martinez, I would like to see a exhaustive thesis about the exact interrelationships between caterpillars and White Walkers. I want it on my desk by Monday. Yeah, well, no, I think you're right. Because one of the other great mysteries of this world is, why are the White Walkers turning up now? Why do they turn up during the Game of Thrones era? Like, what's going on? Is it the seasons? Is it the magic, the dragons? Is it the caterpillars? We don't know. George Martin did have, he did sort of flirt with ecological themes in his Tough Voyaging series, for example. He said that, like, well, you know, in the 70s, ecology was a really hot topic. I mean, you know, Frank Herbert was writing about ecology as well in Dune, and so he wrote Tough Voyaging with, like, an ecological theme. So maybe caterpillars are on his brain. Valar says that a very specific effect of caterpillar season shifting, highlighted by the people studying that shift, was delayed egg hatching in some bird species. I reckon they should introduce a bunch of cane toads. I reckon that'll fix it. Valar says, missed opportunity for the episode to end with the throne cutting Rhaenyra. Yeah, so remember that Rhaenyra's father Viserys cut his finger on the Iron Throne, and then his finger turned black, and then his finger fell off, and then his arm fell off, and he got some crazy disease. So it seems like, you know, the Iron Throne is what killed Viserys, like, literally. It somehow gave him this weird leprosy disease, it seems, or contributed to it. And, yeah, I mean, that would have been an option to have Rhaenyra also cut herself on the throne in that moment. But yeah, I mean, maybe that's something that they'll explore in future. Like, how do we physically symbolize Rhaenyra's relationship with the throne? Thank you, Arza, who says, any meaning to Rhaenyra killing Otto with Dark Sister? Yeah, I mean, look, it's a cool sword with a storied history. We've got an Alt Shift X video about every Valyrian steel sword. There's another Valyrian steel sword held by Bold John Roxton, who we met last episode. He has a Valyrian steel sword called Orphan Maker, which is a pretty rad name for a sword. So yeah, maybe check out that Alt Shift X video, although there are spoilers in that video for House of the Dragon. Thank you, iHeart, who says, hi, Ulf She X. It's so late here, but loved this one. We got together with friends, and it felt like old times. Did you cry more for Simon or for Otto? Obviously for Simon. Otto's a great character, but he's not a good person. Whereas Simon appears to have never done anything wrong, and has such delightful purple clothing. And I hope that he's eating goose in heaven now. Thank you, Vala. We'll hang on. Well, yeah, I mean that's yeah. So Rhaenyra doesn't do a very good job of executing Otto. And you're right, that's similar to in Game of Thrones when Theon Greyjoy takes over Winterfell and he does a bad job of executing Roderick Castle. And so, like, in both cases, I think it's a bad omen of that person's rule. Thank you, Jenny, who says, I would watch Caraxes drinking water all day. I mean, I didn't know that dragons did drink water. I don't know how dragon anatomy works, but it certainly was adorable seeing Caraxes happily slurp away at some lake water. Do you think that Caraxes is enjoying the taste of corpses in that water? I mean, the men were just singing a song about how thousands of dead Lannisters are feeding the fishes in this lake. I mean, Caraxes is probably tasting that. Maybe Caraxes likes the blood in the water. Maybe that's what's going on here. My goodness. Thank you, Roz, and thank you, Alicent, who says, "Hi, Mr. Swift. I've never watched a show that I feel like half the audience isn't actually watching. So many people have lost their mind from the Aemond and Alicent kiss. You would have thought they had a 20-minute sex scene." Yeah, well, look, it was a memorable scene. Roz says that sexual assault scene with Alicent was unneeded. What purpose did that serve? Ahor says, "Love your shift, never change." Boba says, "Rhaenyra failing to execute Otto is like when Theon did the same with Sir Roderick." Yep. Thank you, Slop Enjoyer, who says, "I really liked them making changes for more characterization instead of adding new characters. Fire and Blood is George Martin's worst work, and seeing other book readers be dogmatic about it makes me think that they'd rather have accurate to book than be a good television show." Yeah, I think that it's interesting how people talk about this show, because sometimes people talk about this show like the book is automatically better than the show. And if the show does something different to the book, then it's automatically worse. And I think that, maybe that comes from Game of Thrones, because I think that a lot of the moments that were bad about Game of Thrones was when it differed from the book, or when they didn't have book to adapt anymore. But with House of the Dragon, I think The Fire and Blood is, I agree that it's one of my least favorite George Martin books. And I think that a lot of the changes that they make from the book are good changes. I think that Fire and Blood was not written to be adaptable. I mean, it's funny because the main Game of Thrones books, George said that he was like, I'll just write some crazy fantasy books with 1 million characters and giant castles and massive battles, and they'll never be able to adapt this to TV. And then they did. And so George Martin's like, well, I guess I'll make an even less adaptable book. And he wrote Fire and Blood. Because Fire and Blood has so many characters, and there's so many contradictory little details, and there's very little dialogue, and there's lots going on, and there's ambiguities. Fire and Blood is even harder to adapt than the main Game of Thrones books. And they have to change a lot to make it a watchable show. They can't include every glup shitto. They can't have Pate of Longleaf and Sir Garibald Grey and Red Rob Rivers and Lord Biggleston. Of course it's a good change to remove Lord Biggleston. Of course it's a good change to remove some of these extremely minor characters and put in main characters like Daemon. Most of the changes that they're making are sensible changes. And, of course, there are other changes that are more questionable, like some of the Rhaena stuff or some of the Alicent stuff. But, I agree that it is silly to have this dogmatic view that the book is always better. The book is a different beast. The book is a very weird book at that. An experimental fake history book is what it is, covering 130 years of history. It's a different beast. If you want to enjoy the book, read the fucking book. If you want to enjoy the show, enjoy the show. It is great to criticize and compare. God knows we do a lot of it. But I agree that it's silly to always act like the book is inherently and objectively better. Thank you, Bila, who says, "Having Rhaenyra cry during key moments that should be showing her strength is one of the smaller but noticeable changes." Yeah, I mean, her son Jace just died. Fair enough. I mean, I guess one of the interesting things is, they've always shown Rhaenyra's motherhood as being different to Alicent's motherhood. Alicent never seemed to like her children, never seemed to enjoy motherhood, whereas Rhaenyra does love her children and does enjoy some aspects of motherhood. And now we're in these radically different places where, Rhaenyra is mourning the death of her sons, while Alicent is saying, yeah, you can kill my son, Aegon. Alicent is working against her children. She's engineering her children's downfall, while Rhaenyra is striving to protect her children. So they're definitely opposites in that respect. Thank you, Valar, who says that a cock mentions black swans living near the God's Eye. A black swan is an event that comes as a surprise, has a major effect, is often inappropriately rationalized after the fact with the benefit of hindsight. Maybe Alice is an imposter greenseer. Yeah, I mean, what's that thing about, like, inductive logic is making an assumption where if every swan that you've ever seen is white, you might assume that all swans are white. That might be a reasonable assumption or induction to make. But then, one day, you might see a black swan, and you might be like, huh, my assumption was wrong. Black swans exist. So the idea that, like, a black swan symbolizes an exception to a rule. Yeah, that's an interesting idea, Valar. Maybe Alice is the exception to a rule. I mean, Alice does seem to be unique, because we've seen green seers before. We've seen humans who can skin change into animals and who can see the future through the magic of the old gods. But we've never seen someone who can transform into a goat. That's new. We don't know exactly if Alice can do that. We don't know exactly what Alice is, but she seems like she might be a unique entity. I kind of like the idea of her being like the ghost of the weirwood grove that was cut down. I like the idea of her being a child of the forest in human disguise. There's lots of options, and like I like what they're doing with her. Thank you, Cop X, who says, do you think they should have kept Otto alive as political leverage? Yeah, so I think that Otto might honestly have been useful. I mean, maybe as a hostage against House Hightower, but also just as an advisor. Like, I feel like Otto is the kind of guy where if they imprisoned him, Otto couldn't help but say, hey, you should do this, you should do that, you should ally with them, you should do this policy, you should do that policy. Otto is such a busybody, he's such a, like, you know, bureaucrat, that I feel like Otto could probably be convinced to offer some actually useful advice. I mean, he could also be interrogated to get useful information. Like, so yeah, I agree. Otto could have been useful alive. I mean, what they were saying this episode is that, like, for political reasons, we need to execute people as a symbol of us taking over. Maybe the execution of Jasper should have been sufficient. Maybe the execution of Rickard Thorne could have been sufficient. Maybe they shouldn't have executed anyone. They could have been smarter about this. I mean, you know, there's probably a world in which, like, maybe what they could have done was, like, what if Daemon executed Otto impulsively? Like, what if Rhaenyra wasn't quite sure, she wasn't decided if she wanted to kill Otto, but then Daemon just did it because he hates Otto and he's impatient with Rhaenyra's hesitance. Like, that might be kind of a interesting thing to do. Valar says, I feel silly with my caterpillar theories. I prefer the seasons theory. Look, Valar, I don't think you should be ashamed of your caterpillar theories. I think you should be proud of your caterpillar theories. Thank you, Grand Pop-Tart, who says, no, Caraxes, don't drink the spooky water. God knows what it does to you to drink corpsey magic goat lake water. Who knows what's in that water? There's spooky tree leaves in that water. Thank you, Abby, who says, note to royal family members, don't try to flee through the city in garments that are dyed with bright royal colours. Yeah, it's very funny when Alicent and Helena are trying to escape from King's Landing, and they're trying to look inconspicuous, so they're wearing their little silk hoodies, but their clothes are, like, so obviously fancy and, like, nicer than, like, anyone else's clothes that they stand out. And, like, you can see them getting looks. Like these people. Look at these people who are going, huh, is that the Queen? What's the Queen doing walking down the street of Steel on 3 p.m. and in the afternoon? What's going on here? Because these clothes are way too fancy. Also, how old is Jaehaera? How much time has passed? Jaehaera is Helena's daughter with Aegon, who they're trying to escape with. How old is she? I don't know. I don't know what's going on. But yeah, the royals have way too fancy clothes. They need to get one of Daemon's beanies. Remember when Daemon had, like, drab clothes for Rhaenyra to wear when they went out and partied anonymously in King's Landing? All of the royals need to have, like a peasant costume to get into for these sorts of occasions. Valar says, does Alice genuinely want Harrenhal, or just permission to take the furniture out? Yeah, I don't know. Look, I think like one of the things that's cool about Harrenhal is that you can see the roots of the weirwood trees growing through the walls. And so like the history of this place is that there used to be a weirwood grove here, according to the show. And it was cut down when Harren built Harrenhal, when he built the castle. And then the castle was burned and Harren was killed. And now the weirwoods are growing through the castle again. So it feels like the old gods are reclaiming this place. Like, yeah, there was a castle here. Yeah, there was Dragonflame. But the trees and the weirwoods and nature will return. Which I suppose fits what happens in Game of Thrones Season 8 when Bran becomes king of Westeros. It seems like, in some sense, ultimately, the trees won. The old gods won. Like, humanity will eventually be defeated and be replaced by nature again. We will all sink back into the earth. And so I think there's lots of interesting symbolism there. Nature always wins in the end. That's a bit of a Frank Herbert thing as well. So, yeah, I'm very curious what Alice's plans are. I kind of like the idea that maybe Alice is a bit politically naive. Like she thought that Daemon would just give her Harrenhal. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe they'll keep it mysterious. Thank you, Rick Tator, who says that I hope we get some A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms trailers soon. We need more Duncan Egg, because Egg will grow up too fast. Yeah, well, the showrunner of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, Ira Parker, has talked about that. He is hoping to account for Dexter Sol Ansel growing older and has plans for future seasons of Duncan Egg. And we recently made an Alt Shift X video all about the future stories of Duncan Egg, so go check it out. Thank you, Stansky, who says, the bells didn't ring during Rhaenyra's invasion, and she was able to resist burning King's Landing, despite mourning the death of 2 sons and betrayal from within and without. Does that mean that the bells are enchanted to drive Targaryens insane? Yeah, so, you know, in Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 5, it was silly and frustrating when Daenerys decided to burn thousands of people alive to the benefit of no one. And Rhaenyra is an interesting comparison to Daenerys here, because Rhaenyra's story makes more sense. Yeah, I have nothing positive to say about Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 5. The whole bells thing, like, I'm curious what that's going to be in the books, because there's a character called John Connington in the books who is associated with bells in a way that might actually make sense, but we'll have to wait and see. Thank you, James, who says Alice is working with the Green Men and the Children of the Forest. Yeah, I mean, probably. Like, we've seen Green Men around Alice twice, and the Green Men are presumably in league with the Children of the Forest. But, like, what do the Green Men and the Children of the Forest want? I suspect that they might want to get rid of the dragons. Maybe they want to get rid of all humans. I don't know. It's all a bit mysterious. In the books, it seems as though the Children of the Forest and Bloodraven want to stop the White Walkers. And, like, Alice was showing Daemon visions that showed the Targaryens must save the world from the White Walkers, and she gave Daemon an army, so it seems like maybe Alice believes in Rhaenyra and wants Rhaenyra to win the war, but it's ambiguous. Thank you, Moo, who says that, come on, chat, all these characters will arrive in the next scene with a new wardrobe change and their fresh hair done. Well, look, I liked how Rhaena looked very bedraggled after all of her misadventures. Her hair did not perfectly stay perfect, did not magically stay perfect after her dragon rides. Valar says, Daemon's beanie? I think you mean his no-good hoodie. Yes. Well, yeah, I guess I was thinking of Rhaenyra's beanie. And Kristen has an almost identical beanie in Season 1, Episode 9. I hope the no-good hoodie makes a reappearance sometime this season. Okay. We are going to wrap up this live stream fairly soon. I'd like to remind you one more time that there are lots of bonus videos on Nebula Ultraflex and Glidus are talking about each episode of House of the Dragon at length. So if you're looking for more discussion, you can get it on Nebula. They also have the fake Jon Snow. They have videos about every episode of House of the Dragon. And in July, there's going to be coverage about the Mad King play. I'm very excited to see what this play reveals. It was written with input from George Martin, and it promises to reveal secrets about Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, the Knight of the Laughing Tree, Arthur Dayne, Oswell Went. Any Oswell Went heads in the chat? I'm excited for this play. And if you want to hear our first reactions and impressions to this play in July, you can sign up to Nebula and get our exclusive coverage. I expect there'll also be like a public AltShiftX video about it at some point, but if you want our first impressions, it'll be on Nebula. So I really appreciate it if you sign up to Nebula. You can get 50% off an annual subscription at the link in the description. Thanks. Okay, let's go into the spoiler zone. Spoiler warning, spoiler warning, spoiler warning. So I'm going to respond to your questions that are spoilery, and then I'll have a couple of extra other spoilery comments. So a couple of people suggested that Rhaenyra could be cut by the throne. That is an idea that's in the books. It's said that after Rhaenyra took the throne, she sat the throne all night when she took King's Landing, and afterwards there was blood running down her legs. And I think it's an open question whether that is like propaganda or whether it actually happened. Because again, Fire and Blood is very much about like historical bias and like people being biased against Rhaenyra. But I think that would be a cool image for them to use. I think there's a few different ways they could play it. Here is some artwork of Rhaenyra taking the throne. Isn't this beautiful artwork by Hristo Chukov? This is Rhaenyra taking the throne in one of the books. Looks pretty badass. So I hope that we get like a big dramatic scene like this at some point in the show. It reminds me of Cersei as well, actually. There are Cersei Rhaenyra parallels because, spoilers, but Rhaenyra's arc from here is a spiral into paranoia and self-destruction. It's going to go badly for her. And it'll be interesting to see how they play that. Because in the books, Rhaenyra is more angry, cruel, murderous, unsympathetic. So I'm curious, like, how are they going to play her downward spiral? Or are they going to try and make her more sympathetic? I think that it'll be disappointing if they try to keep Rhaenyra morally pure and heroic all the way through, because it'll completely change her story, and I'm not sure her downfall will make as much sense. Like, I think the tragedy here is that Rhaenyra's downfall is largely self-inflicted, but also informed by all of her loss and all of her allies being shitty. So yeah, I'm curious how they'll handle it. Thank you for the donation from Rosamund, who says, "We know that Rhaenyra Targaryen reigns for 6 months to a year, becoming the first and only Queen of Westeros. How long is her reign in the show?" Yeah, well, I suppose they could do like a time skip. I don't know if they need to or want to. Like, I think that they could compress Rhaenyra's downfall into a shorter amount of time. Like, I mean, I suppose the benefit of a time skip is that they could let her children, Aegon and Viserys, grow up. Because Aegon and Viserys, like, actually matter in the books. Because spoilers, Aegon and Viserys both become kings of Westeros. Like, these two are the future of House Targaryen. And that's why it was kind of weird and frustrating that they didn't include Aegon and Viserys in the show. Because in the show, Aegon barely escapes from the Triarchy, but Viserys disappears. And it's only much later that they discover that Viserys is still alive in the East, and then Viserys and Aegon reunite when Aegon is king. So there's this whole storyline with these kids in the future. And, I can understand that they didn't want to include that because that's not going to be part of this show, Aegon and Viserys aren't really characters in this time period. But for the sake of the future and the lore and the history, it would be nice to at least tell us what's up with them and where they are and what's going on. Because Viserys has to be lost at some point. And I wonder if they will acknowledge that in this show somehow. Thank you, Skilled, who says, spoilers. In this episode, the dragon Caraxes drinks from the God's Eye Lake, and in the end, spoilers, Daemon and Caraxes will die and will be swallowed into the lake. Yeah. I mean, that's what I was thinking of when Alice said, what of my hunger? Like, rubies will not satisfy my hunger. And it's like, damn, like, what are you hungering for, Alice? I think that maybe what the old gods want and what the Weirwoods want is to swallow the dragons. I think if there's one thing that the trees don't like, it's dragons. It's fire. And so I think that is maybe what Alice hungers for. I mean, spoilers, Alice in the books claims to be pregnant by Aemond. She says she has a dragon in her belly. And that, again, fits this symbolism of, like, the old gods swallowing and consuming the dragon flame. She says she can feel the dragon flame inside of her with Aemond's baby. And, Alice's plotline is unresolved in the books because you'll never believe it, but Fire and Blood, the book that this show is based on, is also an unfinished book series. George says that he's going to write a second volume of Fire and Blood to cover the other 170 years of Targaryen history. I swear I'm not making this up. But yeah, I do love that sense of the old gods ultimately swallowing all. The trees eat the souls of the dead humans, and the trees one day will swallow again the fire. Because there are some, like, esoteric theories about maybe the whole power of skin changing and the whole power of dragon riding. Maybe it all came from the old gods ultimately. Maybe this power was stolen from the gods, and that was an atrocity and an injustice that must be righted. The White Walkers and the dragons must be swallowed once more by the gods, restoring the balance of power. There's all sorts of esoteric lore about, like, the Grey King and the dragon Naga, and how, like, the Grey King stole the fire from the gods, and that gave him dominion over Naga. There's actually an old Chipped X video that's, like, on the back burner that's about some of those legends, and how there are many different legends that tell ultimately the same story, which is of man stealing fire from the gods and becoming a tyrant. So I think this whole notion that, like, Azor Ahai was the hero who defeated the White Walkers, I think that Azor Ahai might actually have been a villain who inadvertently created the White Walkers by stealing magic power from the gods. But that's a conversation for another time. All right. Thank you, Valar, spoilers, who says, do you think that Daemon's suicidal duel versus Vhagar and Aemond makes more or less sense as an arc after the Rhaena-Nettles change? Yeah, so spoilers, but I think that what's happening is that I think that Daemon will go after Rhaena and will discover, oh, this new dragon writer is my daughter, Rhaena. The daughter that I ignored is actually a super cool dragon rider, and I need to be a good dad, and I need to teach her how to ride dragons to atone for all of my shitty parenting. And Rhaenyra is going to be like, why is my husband Daemon running off with the girl who stole a dragon and burned my fleet and is disobeying me? And so maybe Rhaenyra will order the death of Rhaena, just like how in the books Rhaenyra orders the death of Nettles. And that would be really interesting for Daemon. Daemon might have to choose between Rhaenyra and Rhaena, and that would be a bit weird because season 2 was so much about Daemon reiterating his loyalty to Rhaenyra. It really seemed as though Daemon believes that Rhaenyra is the chosen one, but ultimately it seems like Rhaenyra and Daemon are estranged. So I'm curious how they'll handle it, but I think that's probably where they're going, with exploring a relationship between Daemon and Rhaena, where in the books it's this weird, ambiguous relationship between Daemon and Nettles. Curious stuff. If you want to hear more speculation along those lines, listen to Dragon Time. Link in the description. Glidus and Swift discuss some of this stuff at length, both in Dragon Time and also in the weeks ahead spoilery chat. Links in the description. All right, I think we're going to wrap up this stream. Thank you very much for listening. I really appreciate y'all coming back season after season. I know some of y'all are disappointed that we're not doing the scripted explained videos this season. I've seen all your comments. I appreciate the love, and I'm looking forward to making lots more videos. So don't you worry about that. We've been talking for a very long time, but yeah, appreciate you like and subscribe. You can listen to these live streams on podcast feeds for free, ad-free, if you would like, link in the description. You can listen on podcast apps. Spotify is not the only place where you can listen to podcasts. You can listen to podcasts for free, ad-free, with podcast apps like Podcast Addict. Well, I guess Podcast Addict does have ads, but there are ad-free podcast apps. That's just a public service announcement for y'all. But yeah, thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you back here next week for another big dragon chat. Thanks for joining. Check out Dragon Time. Peace out. Thank you.